come on up.
So go ahead.
My name is Claire Meeker, 3215 74th Place Southeast.
And my name is Dana Cole, and my address is 9500 Rainier Avenue South in Seattle.
And we are pleased with the City Council's issuing a proclamation in honor of the Stanley M. Dunham Fund and Scholarship Fund, and we'd like to give you a little bit of history of the fund.
Okay. It started in 2010 by some classmates and alums and residents of Mercer Island in support of our wonderful education and empowering young women at the high school. I'm a graduate myself from 1966, so I wasn't a classmate but a schoolmate, and shared history with Stanley and Dunham, as do many on our board. She was a woman ahead of her time, and her children exemplify her values of service in the world, of empowering women to thrive, to overcome poverty, to promote intercultural respect and understanding, peace studies, and academic success. So we've awarded scholarships each of the last 4 years. This is our fourth one. And we've had wonderful alumni from Mercer Island High School that have participated. We've been building community, and it's a wonderful time to come together. And this year, Maya, Stanley and Dunham's daughter, and Barack's sister, has agreed to come to speak and present the award. And we're thrilled to have her. She's bringing her 2 daughters. One is 4 and one is 8. And will be joining us at the community center at noon. And all of the community is invited to come, and we're going to have the Mercer Island Steel Drum Band is going to play for us, and it's going to be a celebration. You know, there'll be some food to eat, and awarding the scholarship is really a special honor. So that's it.
And I just wanted to say a few words about the selection of these applicants. There were 17 applicants this year, and 201, and these are female graduating seniors from the Mercer Island High School, and 201, their academic records were, well, just, above and beyond. They were very close to 4.0s, each and every one, and their service, their community service, both on and off the island, was really stellar, a great variety, very unusual. So we had a hard time choosing.
I wanted to add that on Monday, we are going to be doing a tour with Maya of all the places that her mother lived and went to school. We're going to the high school, and where she lived and played, and she's bringing her daughters. It's a really important homecoming for her, and it's her first time, so really special.
So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Council.
Thank you very much for your work with this. So, okay, proclamation number 3. Promise this is the last one. And Cindy, do we have folks? Okay. So, a proclamation of the City of Mercer Island. Whereas all children deserve to grow up in a safe and nurturing environment to ensure they reach their full potential. And whereas safe and healthy childhoods help produce confident and successful adults. And whereas child abuse and neglect often occur when people find themselves in stressful situations without community resources and not knowing how to cope. And whereas decreasing the occurrence of child abuse and neglect relies upon the efforts of every individual in order to make a positive, substantial impact upon the children of today so they can be leaders of tomorrow. And whereas it takes all of us to make sure that those who need protection receive it. And whereas reporting abuse to the DSHS toll-free number 1-866-END-HARM helps to protect the vulnerable. And whereas Harborview Children's Response Center provides effective treatment and advocacy for abused children in our community. Whereas wearing or displaying a pinwheel in April will serve as a positive reminder that together we can prevent child abuse and keep children safe. Now, therefore, I, Mayor Bruce Bassett, on behalf of the Mercer Island City Council, do hereby proclaim April 2013 as Child Abuse Protection Month. Child Abuse Prevention Month. And I urge all citizens to join me in protecting and nurturing our children. Approved this 8th day of April 2013 by the mayor. Thank you for that. Cindy, do you have any words you wanted to add, or we're set on that? Okay. We were wondering if others might be showing up in conjunction with that, and they did not. So thank you all for your help with proclamations. We move now to appearances, and this time set aside for members of the audience to speak to the City Council upon any issue. Traditionally, the Council does not respond to comments made at the meeting, but will follow up or have staff follow up with the speaker if needed. Each speaker is given 3 minutes to address the Council. Please step to the podium, state your name and address for the record. The yellow light will flash when you have 30 seconds left, and the red light will flash when your 3 minutes are up. This is the first time I'm reading this, so I should have prepped myself on this. We ask that you address your comments to the entire Council and not to individual Council members, staff members, or the audience. We ask that you refrain from applause or disapproval of individuals' comments. Any person who makes personal, impertinent, or slanderous remarks, or who becomes boisterous, threatening, or personally abusive while addressing the Council may be requested to leave the meeting. And with that, we are open for comments, so welcome. Come on forward.
Hello, my name is Rebecca Boucher, and I live at 7040 94th Avenue Southeast. I'm here tonight to support the youth theater. I understand tonight that the City Council will be considering issues related to rehousing the youth theater from its current location. And my family has benefited greatly from the youth theater over the years. Both my kids and my husband are here tonight. And both kids have taken part in the youth theater for years. It's been a very big and important part of building their self-confidence and building their skills as people and as they've grown as children. I think it's important that we have the youth theater and that the city be part of rehousing it, because having it on Mercer Island is such a great resource to our citizens, and it serves a purpose outside of the drama programs they have available through the schools. Often in the schools, the drama program is going to be a place that the most talented certainly will find a place for their skills, but maybe those who are just trying it out are not necessarily going to have a place in it. And having participation in drama has been proven to contribute greatly to a child's growth and to their creativity as they grow. So I hope the City Council will consider being a part of the solution to finding a new home for the youth theater and to contributing to this resource for our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Liz Sanderson. I reside at 3985 92nd Place, southeast of Mercer Island residence since 1993. And I got really involved in the parks for quite a few years, and now I'm here this evening in support of the youth theater staying on the island. I'm very much involved in music and theater, and both of my boys benefited greatly from theater. In particular, my second son with autism, after he had theater training, now can do public speaking. So I can speak from experience that theater changes lives. I know there's 2 locations, and I'd like to say a few words about each location. I am involved in the parks here and in the state parks, so I always like preserving parks, and I would not like to see the theater located where the recycling center is. I feel that area should be preserved, and it's environmentally sensitive. I feel like having a theater near where the light rail is going to be is a very positive location, and that's been proposed by Leon Cohen, who's in the audience. And I'm in great support of having that area be a place where there's going to be parking and theater and more people in the downtown area, that our downtown area is becoming very vibrant. I'm very, very proud of Mercer Island. I'm proud of the 3 proclamations. I I was supposed to retire, so now I am working on state park work with 141 parks and 17 Boys and Girls Clubs in Snohomish County. So I forgot to tell all of you that there's a teen film contest that I'd like to talk about another time. Today I'm talking about the arts, and the arts are near and dear to my heart. I'd like it to be bigger than a theater. I think we have tremendous talent in this town where we could bring performances here. Being close to the light rail would be wonderful. So I support the location that's been proposed by Leon Cohen, and that's what I'm here to say.
Thank you, Liz.
56 seconds left.
Yeah. We love brevity. All right, anyone else? Feel free to line up if you're going to speak.
There are more seats up front. I know two people just came in. They have to sit in the floor there. There are more seats up front if you want it.
Good evening. Thanks for having us and allowing us to speak. I'm Leon Cohen, and I have the property where the tenant Freshy's Fish is at 2411 76th Avenue Southeast. And I think you all know the property. We made a presentation a while back for the transit-oriented development, and so I think you're all familiar with it. But I'm very much in support of the theater also, and I have children that went to the high school, and we've always been attended the theater and enjoyed it very much. So my kids are all musical and play instruments and are composers, and my daughter plays clarinet at the Astoria Symphony in New York City, and so I'm very proud of them and their accomplishments. But I thought that maybe it would be more beneficial to ask the council if you have any questions of me or of the property, just in general, that I could answer. So I thought I'd kind of ask that and see if there's anything that you'd like to ask about the property. I know you're all familiar with the property.
And what I would say is it's good of you to offer to have that conversation, and tonight we'll decide how that proceeds, but right now we'll avoid entering into a dialogue. So, it's good to hear that you are ready to have that conversation.
Yes, just like to put it out there.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again.
Thank you. Anyone else? Manny.
Hello.
Welcome.
First of all, I want to say that I thought working at Youth Theater Northwest, that was the only building where I would be and where I would see somebody dressed up as a large animal. So creativity is alive and well here all across the island. Of course, my name is Manny Kowalin, and I love to tell the story of Youth Theater Northwest. Of course, we have a 30-year legacy. We have served thousands of children, and I loved how in the proclamation earlier you talked about promoting a healthy childhood, and that is what we do. The stories we heard earlier, it's all true. Theater changes lives. Theater saves lives. I could go on and on about the number of times that we have helped children through very, very difficult moments in their lives, from eating disorder issues, depression, how we give them a place for them to express themselves and move through childhood to become a successful adult, an adult that is articulate and also creative as well. One personal story I have, before I worked as executive director, I was a director who would come and direct one show every year at Youth Theater Northwest. And one year they had me direct the world premiere of a show about a girl named Sadako who died of leukemia in Japan after the bombing of Hiroshima. Ironically, we auditioned this play the week after September 11th. And we rehearsed this play about destruction and death in our aftermath of what we saw on TV. What rehearsals were like for many, many weeks is we would just create statues telling stories, and we cried through most of them as we tried to deal with our own feelings. So theater, the power of creativity, the power to tell stories really touches people and moves us forward. Of course, as we all know, we're looking for a new home. Time is ticking away. We support the school district and their ambitious bond efforts that will be coming up, I'm sure, in the next year. We also recognize that 18 months after that, a wrecking ball will be hitting our building. So we are very, very concerned about a new home. We've been doing a lot of work. We've been talking to a lot of people. We've been looking at different capital campaigns. But a lot of times we feel like we're going in circles. And I was talking to a good friend of mine who was the executive director for Windhoek Asian Museum, and they built a $24 million museum. And he said to me, nothing happens until you get a site. So I really urge you to help us find that site. We need city support for us to make a reality for a new home for Youth Theater Northwest and for us to move forward. So I thank you very much for all of your help thus far, and I'm looking forward to more conversations so that we can continue to promise our children the possibility for them to create, to play, and to shine. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Kai McClure, and I live at 9242 Southeast 46th Street. I'm 18 years old and a senior at Mercer Island High School, and last month I finished my last show at YTN. There were a lot of tears. I started at YTN when I was 6, and it has been a life-changing experience. I don't think I would have picked my course in life and the way that I've conducted myself throughout my life so far without the lessons that I've learned through theater. YTN teaches not just how to act, but how to be a member of a community. And it's a very large community, probably not as well represented here among the students as I would have hoped, but we all have busy rehearsal schedules. It also teaches us to be outgoing. It teaches us teamwork and public speaking. When I was in elementary school, I was very withdrawn. I wouldn't have been up here talking to you. These skills have helped me to be an advocate within our community. I was on the 21st Century Planning Committee, and recently I've been working with CTC, which is an alcohol and drug abuse prevention coalition on the island. And the skills that I've learned through theater has allowed me to be an active member as a part of those community coalitions. Next year I plan to continue that advocacy work through theater at Stanford University. There's a wonderful advocacy through theater group that I plan to be a part of, and that YTN's work in those areas has inspired me to continue. In closing, I want to say that YTN is absolutely a community resource. It teaches us to work through the arts in a way that I don't think we gain through school, especially in the younger years in elementary school and in middle school. And our community values the arts. I mean, you just have to look at our band to see that. And I just want to ask you to please help us protect this wonderful resource so that I can come back and visit it for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. And congratulations on Stanford.
Thank you.
Yeah. Welcome.
Hi, good evening. I'm Wendy Weicker. I'm at 4808 East Mercer Way, and I just want to advocate for Youth Theater Northwest and remind you that it's a regional resource. We have people coming to the island from Bellevue, from Kirkland, from Seattle, and they stay because their kids are here for 2 hours. They go shopping, they stop at Starbucks, they eat at the restaurants, their families come in. It's an economic resource for this island, and our economic future and community resources, I think, can't compare to Youth Theater Northwest. This is a jewel in our community, and we should do everything we can to keep it here and support it as much as possible. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.
Welcome.
I am Jackie Wood, actually not from the island. I'm someone that she just described who comes off island to take her daughter to Youth Theater Northwest, 15838 266th Avenue Southeast, Issaquah 98027. I actually first heard about Youth Theater Northwest over 12 years ago when I worked for Meow Cat Rescue, which was on the island at that time. And one of the volunteers, her daughter, was in middle school, and she just told me what an amazing program it was. And she said her daughter, no, she doesn't want to be in front, not out in the theater. She wants to be in the back. She wants to work on the costumes, on the staging, and she found her niche there. And what I thought was very interesting is, as my daughter now, she's 10 years old, She's not an athlete. She's not into a lot of the other things, but boy, she's been acting since out of the cradle. And we tried the program in Issaquah, and we tried the program in Kirkland, and there just wasn't a fit. And so twice a week, I drive from Tiger Mountain all the way to Issaquah just to bring her here. And it's a community. One of the parents said, the director, Amy, she said about her, I would follow her anywhere. And that touched my heart because I thought, this is the program where I want my daughter. Now, the odd coincidence, and that seems to be in this area, is the stage manager for the last play that my daughter was in. This young woman, ironically, is the roommate of the daughter of the woman I worked with. And she said, you know, I still am best friends with the people that went to Youth Theater Northwest that did these productions. And they're not all in theater. No. Some of them are in the sciences, some of them work in the tech industry, all across the board. But she said what they got, the experiences have helped them. I mean, how many, right now, I'm speaking in front of you, how many people would rather jump off a bridge or have a root canal than do that? My daughter, I think I could almost bring her up here, but a lot of the kids, she's shaking her head. But you know what? She gets up on that stage, she's comfortable. Yeah. She gets in front of class, she's comfortable to give a presentation, and I know that's what this gives. I would love to steal it and bring it to Issaquah. I would love to if I had the money to go to do that. But keep it here. Please, just make the effort because the kids really need it, and the adults whom they grow into. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. My name's Sarah Ford, and I'm at 8405 Southeast 34th Place. I'm also here tonight to talk about youth theater. Our family's been fans of youth theater for several years now. It all started when my daughter was 3 and going to Country Village, and every day we'd be getting in and out of the car, parking lot, she'd see the big, beautiful posters on youth theater's wall, and was curious, what is this? And so starting from age 3, we've attended probably 80 or 90% of the productions at youth theater. She went on to be in many classes, several productions. She would be here tonight, but she's rehearsing at youth theater for the next production. I could say lots of things about it being a second home and a wonderful community, things that have already been said tonight. But I also wanted to talk about it from a real estate perspective. I'm a real estate agent on the island, and I often work with people moving here from Seattle or the east side or across the country. And when I'm working with people who are new to the island or considering the island compared to another neighborhood or another city in the area, I take them on a tour around the island. I'll show them some houses, but we'll also pop them into island books, maybe have lunch at Alpenland, show them all of our beautiful parks, take them down to the water, show if they have kids, show them the ball fields, and I show them youth theater. And I can't tell you, every single time the reaction is so enthusiastic. People are thrilled to hear about this gem that we have right here in the community. They pick up the programs with the summer camps or the productions coming up, and they just can't wait to get their kids enrolled. And so it's a real asset that when people are considering the quality of life of the schools and the parks, they're also looking at things like the theater, and it's not to be underestimated how that is felt when people are considering Mercer Island. So I'd encourage whatever can be done to help find a new home. It's an absolute gem, and we need to keep it here.
Thank you. Ladies.
Let's guess what you heard about.
You can pull the microphone down to you.
Okay. My name's Claire Alderman. I live at 7843 Southeast 40th Street on Mercer Island. My name's Amanda Wine, and I live at 8021 Southeast 71st Street on Mercer Island, and we are both students at YTN.
Welcome both.
Thank you. Through YTN, I have not only met a lot of really wonderful people, but I've also gotten much better at acting and singing and gotten over my fear of public speaking. I have been at youth theater since I was 6, and over these couple years I have been in 7 plays, and I have I have learned so much throughout my experience. Youth theater offers a lot of creativity, and now I am in a program E2 at West Mercer, and it requires a lot of creativity, and I don't know if I would have had all of that if I hadn't been at youth theater first. At youth theater, you have so many experiences. You get to meet people. You just get to express yourself in different ways that school nor sports nor anything else can offer you, and it's just an amazing place. We have a lot of activities, and youth theater is definitely my favorite one. We don't have a lot of time to commute to everywhere, and I can even walk to youth theater from my school, and so it's definitely a lot easier for me to do maybe even more than one play here. And so I think it's really nice if it would stay on the island, because then I think I would definitely be able to participate more in it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, great job, ladies. I wish that I could public speak as well as you just did.
They are a tough act to follow, that's for sure. That's for sure. I'm Josh Rosenstein. I'm at 9789 Southeast 41st, and I have to leave in just a minute to pick up my daughter from youth theater, who's there, and my son just got back from rehearsal as well. I've been working directly with youth theater on an ongoing basis to help it find a new home. And I want to make sure the council and other people understand the extent to which youth theater has been working over the last couple of years. The theater is not looking, I think, to just recreate a building that's exactly what it is right now, because the theater has a vision that it has been working with the board, primarily subcommittees of the board, the wider community, and anybody else who will listen, basically, to think, what could youth theater be? We know that we have this gem already here, and it can be a lot greater than it is, providing more services right here on the island, as well as really making a mark throughout the region and bringing other people onto the island, and really making a name for what Mercer Island has to contribute to the larger community. We have talked on occasion to some other organizations around, and have been considering an idea being floated around about a performing arts center that's not just focused on the theater. It's still evolving, but this is something that I just want to make sure that the council knew that the theater is open to discussing with other groups around, including city-based groups, other nonprofit organizations providing art services. We already have teamed up with dance organizations on the island. You know, they present every year the Nutcracker excerpts that are there. We have some other groups that travel through the area and provide especially youth-centered programming. So this is something that is in the hopper and want to make sure that you're aware of. So, and I got to go before I'm going to be late. Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Hello, I'm Emma, and
I'm Aiden,
and we live at 7040 94th Avenue Southeast. And
well, we're both going to a school next year that's Seattle Academy, and they did a study that said the greatest scientists and academics actually had some arts and performing in their life. And yeah, sure.
And I would just like to say that the only reason I'm up here is because I was in the performance series class Peter Rabbit last session with Madeline. And it was so much fun, and I'm not a drama star. I wouldn't audition for the play. I wouldn't have before that. And it was just so much fun, and it's made me just a lot more confident and outgoing. And I'm going to do a lot of summer camps with youth theater too, and it is just so much fun. Good talk, Ryan.
Well, and I just think it's really important that it stays here, and so that because if it moved to somewhere like Issaquah, we wouldn't really be able to make that commute.
It'd be a long drive.
But there's one person in the audience who'd like that.
Well, and I've met a lot of people and that I wouldn't have otherwise known, and they're really, really great friends. And yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you both. Well done. Welcome, Eva.
Hi there. I actually hadn't planned to say anything, but I know absolutely nothing about the Youth Theater Northwest because my kids were never creative enough to do anything of the sort. But now that all these folks really love it, I just wonder how many of these folks would pay the toll to come onto the island. I think that really has to be considered. The woman from Issaquah, if she comes here twice a week, I think that would be something to be considered, $8 round trip. So I just figured this just was a great segue into the I-90 tolling business, but I think that's to be considered because I don't know how many people who actually work and contribute to Youth Theater Northwest live on the island, whether it's the directors or stage people or whoever. So just another reminder.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. It's been a while since I've been on this side of the mic. Actually, my name is Dan Hubble. I live at 7800 Southeast 27th Street here in downtown Mercer Island, and former deputy mayor of the city of Newcastle. So I've been on your side of the dais. And sort of what I want to talk about tonight is there's not very many opportunities that we've had as public servants to take a passionate group of people in the community and invest in something tangible and something real that's going to be more than just the administrivia of what's the zoning, what's the tolling going to be, how are we going to position our statement for or against this or that. This is an opportunity for the city to say, here's an organization that wants to be a part of our community and root it here. And not just, be something that uses the resources, but really root itself here in the community. And I'm a little bit jealous that I can't sit where you're at tonight and be a part of really helping move forward something that can be a legacy for this city long term. Because there's not many opportunities that any of us sitting in public service will have to do that. I was fortunate. I have a name on a bridge in Newcastle. It's great. I can take my kids there and I can do that. But it's a bridge, right? I mean, you're driving across it. You can build, you can help be a part of building a theater. And as all these people here have spoken much more eloquently than I have, theater and the arts is so much of who we are as people and as community and as just enjoying our lives. And we need to have those resources in the city. You have the opportunity to be a part of helping facilitate that, and I hope you take that opportunity. I know you have a lot of decisions, and there's a lot of process that goes into this, but just think about that legacy that you can help be a part of leaving with this community that's going to last for a long, long time, well beyond whatever your term might be. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Welcome.
Leslie Bain. I live at 4180 West Mercer Way. And he was talking about this being a legacy for a long, long time. I'm here as a mom who has raised 3 boys. There's still one going through. But my second son pretty much lived at Youth Theater for a long time. And it was an amazing place for him. And, it's been here for 30 years. So I represent, many years of families that have not only been a part of Youth Theater for a certain period of time, but that remain part of this incredible community. And every kid should have a passion. And it's really fun to watch these kids from when they're little. And there's boys and girls, big kids, little kids. It's the greatest kind of sense of community. And they grow up to be confident and articulate and poised young people, and it's a wonderful thing that we have in our community, and want to do everything we can to keep it here. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, with that, I will close public comments, and given the makeup of the audience, the interest in this issue, we had designed this evening's agenda to make you sit here for hours and hours. We thought we had a quick consult up here while that was going on, and we're going to move agenda bill, or item 9, up to the first item of regular business, so that we can let kids be on their way to do homework before it gets too late. So with that, we move to minutes. We have 3 sets of minutes, and I would entertain a motion for the first set.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the minutes. And Ally, do you want us to do them one at a time? I knew you were going to say that. Move to approve the first set of minutes.
We'll point out, Mr. Grady's working from a computer for the first time, so this will be interesting. Let us know how it goes.
Correction?
Well, let's get a second for it first. And then,
second.
Okay.
Just a little niggly thing I noticed. This is a meeting which unfortunately I missed, but I noticed that one item on page 5 was moved by Mike Grady and seconded by Mike Grady.
I have the power to do that. It's a recent rule change in local government law.
That's the power.
At the top of the page. Small correction, thanks.
Special.
Allie, you'll do something to make that. Okay, very good. Anything else, Jane?
No.
Okay. Any other corrections to those minutes? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, that carries. Thank you.
I move to approve the minutes from the March 4th, 2013 meeting.
Second. Any corrections or changes to those? All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries too. March 18 minutes.
Move to approve the March 18 minutes, please.
Second.
Well, so it's going to be as amended twice, because there's still, although I like the idea of being able to be multiple places at once, it appears that I opened the meeting rather than Dan, and then I was absent, and then I was involved in at least one motion or one vote. So Ally, I know, is aware of both of those changes, and we'll change those. But the top one I don't think made it into the set that we have here. Or, yeah. So
just approve it, and Ally will make the changes.
Yeah, let's call them. Okay. Anything else other than my ability to be in 2 places at once? No. Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Very good. That carries too. I should pause for a moment and say thank you, Deputy Mayor. You ran an unbelievable meeting while I was gone. I should be gone more often. You had the whole it was a very complicated night. You were done at 9:30. I wish I'd been here for that. But well done.
And peace in Palestine this week. So
yeah. All right. So we move to the consent calendar, which has payables, payroll, and 2 agenda bills. Do we have a move? Anyone care to move to adopt the consent calendar?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
And
I have a question or an observation on set 1, page 13, which would be the March 20th accounts payable. I have a question.
Just going to be one? Let's go ahead and try it and do it then.
Okay. So I have a question on set 1, page 12. I see some receipts there for a video. Are we getting into the video business? Are we producing videos? Is that what that is?
Help us know where you are, Mike.
Top of
I'm on set 1, page 12.
Upper part of page 12.
Upper part.
bnhphoto/video.com. This is on the March 20th version of them.
We'll just have to get back to you. We'll research it, and somebody will give you a call, Mike.
Okay.
You're on the other one.
No, I've got it.
Oh.
Yeah.
Diane Mortensen, Recreation Superintendent. I'm assuming what that is the marketing videos for the community center. So I don't have it in front of me. If you could tell me the amount, I could probably
No,
confirm.
you just verify it and then shoot me or the whole council an email.
Will do.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Diane.
That's all I have.
Okay. All in favor of the consent calendar, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Very good. Arts Council, Jane, thank you for your work. We just slid right through. We thought you had to do a report, and I'm sure I assume you're okay with that since it was on consent calendar. Okay, thank you. And if we have somebody here for the road stuff, thank you for doing that too. Okay, we're going to move to Agenda Bill 4825, Youth Theater Northwest Siting Next Steps. And
it's me.
That's you. Okay.
Yeah, I got to find it first. Council, at your planning session in January, we had a conversation about Youth Theater Northwest and its siting saga, as well as Mary Waite Pool. We're not going to talk about Mary Waite Pool tonight, but we kind of combined those two, if you'll recall, back in January. After quite a bit of discussion of the efforts that we have gone through trying to work with the Youth Theater Northwest on some sites where some development ideas had percolated up, we stopped. And as you'll recall, those were discussions about the East Seattle school site currently held by the Boys and Girls Club, and then we had some conversation about sort of the status of the proposal that Leon Cohen had put together. At that point, you asked the staff and the deputy mayor to investigate the possibility of some kind of performing arts theater development at the Recycle Center site and Bicentennial Park. We all know that the issues that site has is it's less about building buildings, but it's more about where do you put the cars. So the notion at the time was to see if there was some kind of shared parking arrangement that we could reach with Farmers Insurance, thinking that there was some symbiotic relationship that could be developed there, given the hours of work with the insurance company and Youth Theater being late afternoon and evening. We were not able to reach any agreement with Farmers. The deputy mayor and I went and spent part of the morning with the leadership that's on site. I will say I think the decision-making at Farmers is both on-site and it's also off-site. The corporate headquarters is in New York, and so in some respects it's a little bit difficult to make your case when you're not talking to everybody that makes the decision. But they were clear that this did not fit into their vision for how their parking lot would operate. So I'm here to report that to you, and we are here tonight to talk about what do we do next. We've tried several sites. The last idea hasn't panned out, and we need to find out from the council what is your will about trying to develop any other ideas. In your agenda bill, I've outlined two possible scenarios that we could continue to work on. One would be to continue to try and find a way to develop at the Recycle Center site and Bicentennial Park and solve the parking issues, perhaps in tandem with the thrift shop expansion project that you have already launched us on. We know that there's going to be a need for additional parking to serve the thrift shop, and perhaps there's again a way to do shared parking that is in both interests of both uses. I say that, I don't know if that works at all, so I wouldn't want to give anybody's hopes too far, get them up, because we just haven't looked at it, but we could look at it. We have retained some architectural services to look at the thrift shop, and it would be a fairly simple matter of asking them to also look at how could parking expansion be done in a way that might meet the needs of both uses. The other potential site is to, again, go back, if Youth Theater is willing to to look at the Cone property and see if there is, in fact, a project there. So I don't have any other project ideas other than those two, and maybe you do. And at this point, we're just looking for what's your interest and guidance.
Let me add two other points to this, just so the council's aware of it. After our unsuccessful effort with farmers, and I still, by the way, hold out hope that that might yet turn around the other way, but as Rich accurately reported, their decision at this point is not to provide parking. But after we advised Youth Theater Northwest about that, they have on their own initiative engaged with other property owners in the area and have gotten some favorable responses from them as to possible arrangements that can be made. So that's farmers turns out not to be the only option. Obviously, it would have been the best option, but there are other property owners which would be willing to work with a Performing Arts Center / YTN facility at the recycling center property. The second thing the council needs to keep in mind is that what's happened with the Walgreens site. As Rich reported, I believe at the last council meeting, the developer that the city had originally talked to, Bruce Lorg and Associates, has advised the city that that project is not going forward at this point. So that was going to be the site for the potential park and ride, a second park and ride, and the use of the money from Sound Transit that has been discussed for building additional park and ride capacity. As Leon Cohn mentioned, that he originally had proposed his property as a potential alternative site for the park and ride. So we now need to consider that in the equation, since Walgreens is off the table, whether we can redirect staff to be looking at Leon's site, either as part of a YTN project or completely separate and apart from a YTN project, as a site for a park and ride, either in conjunction with another development there or as a standalone development. So, two other pieces to throw into the mix here.
Okay, so let's start with questions for Rich or any others. I guess it's really Rich at this point before we get into a council conversation about this. Mike, then Jane, then Tona.
Rich, thanks, Bruce, for the presentation and the information. So the only two sites that were currently in play are the Freshies site and the Recycle Center. Has anybody approached the Boys and Girls Club about the West Mercer site? And is that on the table at all? Or?
Yeah, that's the one I was speaking of. The East Seattle School site is the West Mercer site.
Right.
And a year ago, we approached the owner of that site, which isn't the Boys and Girls Club. They have a lease.
Right.
And we approached the owner about a possible acquisition, and we could not come to terms. The price was too high.
In a down market, the price was too high.
Yes.
Jane?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the status of the other sites that were identified as possible TOD development sites, because the Freshies site was one, Walgreens was the other, and there were three others, as I recall.
Well, one of the others was the Legacy site, and actually we did have some conversations during their project development process, and there might have been a chance that could work. They have moved on with their project, as you know, and the development agreement has been approved, so that's behind us, and arguably it's too far away from where the trains would be, which is what all the other sites that suffered from, was just too far to walk. The other sites would have been south of the Walgreens site, where Mr. Kissan's property behind Walgreens is a potential smaller site. But again, we're starting to push the distance so far. Will people actually make that trip?
And then there must be one other, which I have...
I'm not sure if there really is another, if I'm counting them right. If we had talked about another site, it would have been actually even further south, where the current the bicycle shop and...
oh, okay.
So, same problem.
Tana, then Debbie.
Just so I could wrap my head around, when we talk about parking, the need for parking, what is the ideal, or what's the parking usage for youth theater? Like how many parking spaces? Do we have a sense?
Actually, that would not be something we would know. That would be something that YTN would know.
Manny, you care to venture? Step up to the microphone if you would, just so that it's on the record.
Well, our current building is designed like an old shopping market. So there's a huge parking lot and the building set in the back. Currently, the way the parking lot is set up is half of the parking lot is ours and Country Village and all the other the daycares on the side, and that side has 80 parking spaces. And then if you look at the other side of the lot, that is a site that is shared with the high school for students during the day, and that has about 60 parking spaces. Now, on average, YTN has a very high number of people per cars for a trip to the theater, mainly because we serve families. Like, usually it's about 4 people per car. I know this because I work at the box office for most of the shows. So generally, we feel that if we would have a performing space of up to upwards of 400 seats, we would need about 100 parking spaces. And that's why through the coalition that we have been aiming to create ourselves, we've been gearing, focus on trying to get 100 parking spaces. We have an agreement where Covenant Church said that we could go forward and name them as a potential parking partner. They would want to work out very specifics, regarding some of their services and arrangements. We have another parking lot. I kind of hesitate to say the name of it yet because we've talked to most members of the family that own that property, but there's about 2 more family members we have to sit down with. But that site parking lot has 50 parking spaces, and everyone we've talked to has been very favorable for us working on an agreement. And they are a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 business, so they're perfect for us. Generally, our usage is in the evenings and weekends for performances. Our classes are not the kind of classes where parents stay for them, of course, so we just need a place for drop-off. So generally, very light parking needs during the day, heavy use evenings and weekends.
Thank you.
Yep.
Debbie.
Yeah, one of the questions I have is when we're looking at Mr. Cohen's site, because from what I understand, his site is that almost pie-shaped wedge. The grassy area that extends into the intersection, corner of 76th and 24th, as far as I understand, the city owns with some contingencies from Department of Transportation.
That's correct.
So when we're looking actually at that site, are we looking at just that pie-shaped wedge, or are we actually looking at incorporating that whole?
Both parts, so it becomes 2 triangles making a rectangle.
Okay, so in essence, that essentially doubles it.
Yes.
One of the basic questions I have is, I know, were we ever to transfer ownership of that particular piece of property, we would have to sell it at fair market value. Is there any financial transaction with the state or other body in the event that we use it for projects such as youth theater?
We have an agreement from the state, and I guess I should back up a step for the sake of the audience. The city received title to that piece of property in what we call turnback from the building of the freeway, and ultimately the land that was no longer part of the freeway construction. A number of parcels were turned over to the city. So we have it, we have title to it, but with stipulations that it can only be used for exactly what it's used for right now, green space, or some other transportation-related function with the blessing of the state. And we have asked them, and they have said yes, if we were to have a project there, as we have described Mr. Cohen's proposal for a Youth Theater Northwest plus parking plus condominiums above. So we can do this. I mean, we have approval from the state to do it, and we do own that piece of property. Now, I haven't pursued this at all with Mr. Cohen, but I guess I'll throw this out, and you can tell me whether or not you think it's got any legs to it. Another way to develop that piece of property is for the city to acquire Mr. Cohen's property, rather than he acquire ours, we acquire his, and the city drive the development. That puts you in a role that is very different than you traditionally have had, but that is an option.
Other questions? Mike?
So on both scenarios, Rich, what's the vision on financing this?
Mr. Cohen's proposal would be to purchase the city-owned property. The proceeds from that purchase would ultimately go back to the state of Washington. We don't get to keep it. And then all the rest of the development would be financed privately through donations by YTN and/or through Mr. Cohen and his development.
And then the recycle.
Unless you had the TOD part of it.
The TOD would have financing coming out of Sound Transit.
But that TOD would be distinct from Youth Theater Northwest, would it not?
Well, it's all part of the same building, so if you look at the whole project.
Parking.
Yeah, there would be some attempt, and I think with some chance, at shared parking arrangements, if they made sense. I mean, if the timing worked well between commuters and Youth Theater's needs. I think we've had signaled by Sound Transit that they are open to that dialogue.
And then the recycle center?
Have not got there at all, because you haven't launched me into that yet.
So it's going to cost money. What's your vision of?
Well, the land we own, so the building, I don't know, private donations.
Would that be that would be a city building then?
I don't know that.
It could be a ground lease, Mike, or it could be.
It could be lots of things.
We
haven't got that
building that funded through private donations. I mean, the options are out there. We just have to have staff engaged.
Well, I mean, what are the options? Is it
could be private?
To talk about it now?
Could be privately financed. Could be publicly financed.
But I think that the whole purpose of this discussion is whether the council wants to direct staff to start having those discussions with Mr. Cohn, with YTN, and to understand so that it can enough about what's realistic to come back to the council and say, yes, we can pursue this. As Manny said when he addressed us, though, they need to move forward, and they need to have a site so that if they're going to be able to come back and have a discussion with the city about what the possibilities are, they need to be able to go out and fundraise and plan against a site. So we're a little bit in the catch-22 here, but I think we're at the point that we need to take a leap, and without committing ourselves to what the final solution is going to be on this, at least if we're willing to tell YTN that, yes, we as a city council, if the stars align correctly, we would be prepared to say YTN can be here or there, and so they know. I mean, if we, for example, sit here and say, the recycling center property is off the table, then we have to engage staff to talk with Leon and with YTN and see if there's any possibilities there. I mean, obviously that property is owned by Leon right now, and for the most part, so he would have a lot more to say in it. If we say, no, let's focus on the recycling center property and maybe have staff, if they want to engage with Leon Cohen on a TOD project by itself, that's another option for us. But, I mean, those are the types that we need to give staff direction. We need to tell YTN what they should be looking at. What I don't want to do is come out of this thing tonight and say, it might be here, it might be there, and we don't really know yet. I mean, they need to know what our thinking is.
And you're not going to solve this tonight, of course. I would hope at a minimum tonight, if, for example, these two sort of sites and potential options have any interest with you, you would give us direction and say, go develop those ideas more concretely and bring them back to us. I suspect we'll probably end up having this on your mini-planning session agenda. You would be giving us about 8 weeks to go see what we could develop in terms of a proposal.
Okay. Other questions? All right, well, let's have council, I'm sorry, Jane.
I guess it's a question. Have we eliminated other sites?
At your...
I mean, I don't want to throw another ringer in here, but I don't think that maybe there's other sites to look at.
At your planning session, you actually did say if the farmers' talks don't turn out, then the next, you would want us to come back to talk about the next possible public sites. And Mercerdale, of course, is one. And then it starts to get challenging. I guess the next one that I've heard people bring up is the property on the community center site up, we all affectionately call it Grouse Mountain.
I'll sell it.
I bet you will. You got some swampland in Florida, too. But we don't have, the city doesn't own a lot of spaces where it would make sense. We've got parkland, we've got open space land, and they are such dedicated uses that I guess I'm not even going to suggest any more ideas and let you guys do it, because it's the minute you put out an idea, it's going to produce a lot of attention.
Well, that's the idea I'd like to put forward, that we should, if we're going to study these two sites, we should also study Grouse Mountain. Something that could be built in to the mountain, perhaps shared parking with the community center. I just think we would be derelict not to look at that.
Okay.
Debbie's voting for derelict.
Trying hard to wait a minute here before speaking. So I think I want to, I guess, just reiterate for a moment what I heard from you and put my own spin on it, but that is, I think we are not going to solve this problem tonight. We are merely going to say, do we wish to study this some more and have some flesh on those bones come the planning session for us to begin to really talk about what this could be or could not be. I think if we go, I think Jane's on the right track that if we want the scope to be broader than that, we probably ought to set that scope now. But beyond that, I don't think we want to add much more detail to this other than a yay or nay that we'd like staff to go to work on this. So with that, let's move on to council discussion. You got a question, or you want to move to discussion?
Question first. So school district property is off the table? Or is that still a part of the mix?
It's not our problem.
We don't own it.
That was a discrete question.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, my understanding, Mike, is that the school board has publicly said that their preferred site is the Mega Block, and unless that changes, then
the preferred school
site for a school.
Preferred site for a school is the Mega Block.
Right.
So unless that changes, then yes, the Mega Block is off the table.
I think they also, in one of your joint meetings and sessions, in effect said, we'll take responsibility for the capital needs of the pool, and we hope that the city council will help YTN. And that's sort of an unwritten agreement that you have in distribution of community assets that we're working on. Does that sound familiar to you?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Debbie?
Well, I'm not going to weigh in too heavily on either site, but, for me, it's what is the criteria that we're using here, and definitely personal editorial here. Just listening to the testimony tonight and thinking so much about how youth theater, I think, has broadly affected the island and the region, I hope that the council's remaining fully committed to working with them to find a new home, and a new home here. So when I go beyond that, I start thinking about so many of the different opportunities that the island faces, and of course, one of them is development of the town center and ensuring that we have sooner rather than later sufficient parking, particularly as they start closing or talking about closing down those center lanes. And, that causes me a great deal of interest when we start looking at being able to pursue a TOD type arrangement. On the other hand, I look at the recycle center and I think about the possibilities there for open air performances, for the community gathering place that Mercerdale is, without too far impinging on the park itself, but then underscoring it's a park. And I think it is a park that's held very near and dear to many communities and people within the island, and that can be quite sensitive. And I'm not sure I would want to see us do anything that would generate too much of an anti-vote based on location. And then finally, I'm just looking at the fact that there are young children and there are children who are middle school and high school who are coming on and off the island to access it. And I think about the possibilities if it is close to light rail and what that can mean for a certain amount of independence to access that if and when we do face additional transportation challenges. So those are the criteria I'm looking at. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other, but I do think both of them offer some tremendous opportunity, of course, for youth theater, but so many other aspects and elements of the quality of Mercer Island life. And I hope we keep moving forward quite quickly.
Okay. Others want to weigh in? Mike, then Dan.
I'm with Jane. I think we ought to throw in the pea patch or whatever you want to call that mountain, other than the grouse mountain. It just has negative connotations. Mainly because it's...
Grouse mountain is not the same as a pea patch. Let's make that clear.
Don't get me started. I can make a linkage there that you wouldn't like. One, because of the location. It'll be close to the light rail, close to the transit, close to the community center, but the view is spectacular. And I think to what extent we can look at a performing arts center, which includes the Youth Theater Northwest. I can imagine having at some point in time, a Mercer Island Symphony with the backdrop being able to look through the windows out at Lake Washington and potentially even up to the mountains. So I think there's tremendous potential with that site.
Okay, Dan.
I think that, this is the first time that I'm aware of anyone's talked about the Pea Patch property as a potential site for YTN or for a performing arts center. And my concern, very simply, is that there is a very large constituency on the island that is going to be rankled by that big time. And the last thing that I want to do now is start a war between the Pea Patch community and YTN, because no matter how you cut it, someone's going to lose on that, and it's probably the city of Mercer Island at the end of the day. I feel pretty strongly on this one that we need to give city staff the go-ahead to pursue active discussions with YTN about a performing arts center / Youth Theater Northwest facility on the recycling center property. And because it's a property we control, it's a property that essentially is paved over right now, so the project could be done with no loss of park space other than that area of Bicentennial Park, which is paved over and is for public restrooms. There's nothing else really there. So it's not impinging on Mercerdale. We would have to determine whether we could address the parking issues there. But again, we control the site, and this is something that we can move forward with YTN very quickly. The Leon Cohn site, Mr. Cohn controls that site, and he has been working with YTN over the last several months to try to develop something, and I would encourage him, as I have privately done already, to continue to try to develop something. But that's something that only he can initiate in the first instance, because he owns the property. So the city working with YTN on the recycle center property doesn't preclude Leon from also engaging with YTN and seeing if something can be worked out. At the same time that I feel the staff should be engaging with YTN on the recycling center property, I also believe it's perfectly appropriate for staff to engage with Leon Cohen on the TOD development, because obviously the TOD is not going to go down at the recycling center property. The two are in my mind, are mutually exclusive. So this could be a win-win for the community in that we end up with a performing arts center down near Mercerdale Park, being able to provide both outdoor and indoor performances, and at the same time we end up with a TOD project, either with Leon Cohn or working out something where we buy the property from him, whatever makes sense for all parties, but we end up ending up in the right place at that point. What I'm very concerned about is if we open the door up to other properties at this point, it sounds good, and yes, we should consider all of our options, but I think we're beyond that point. And I'm very concerned that if the word P-patch walks out of this council tonight as a viable option, then 2 weeks from now, there will be many more people that are sitting here tonight, screaming at us saying, you guys have got to be kidding. And I don't want to have two very important groups in our community fighting each other over something that one has to lose. And we don't have to have that. There's no need for that. So.
Okay, others? Tony?
I would just echo a lot of the sentiment in the audience. I have 2 children, and one has benefited greatly from things that we've done up here, like the baseball, turfing the infield of the baseball diamond and all the other fields. And my daughter is now just started at YTN. So, and she's not athletic. And so I think there is that balance in our community. The city is involved in fields, we're involved in sports, and clearly I think it is natural and makes sense that this is just a continuation of addressing and helping another segment of our young population on the island. So I definitely think it's within our purview and an important thing for the city to focus on. It is, as people said, a gem for our community. I love the idea of it being called a Performing Arts Center and having it a little bit broader than just kind of the Youth Theater Northwest concept, and really bringing all arts groups and arts opportunities together. And one thing with the recycling center area, as we're talking about parking being good for the evening and for the weekends, is that is a park that is used very much, obviously, during the day, and would want to make sure that we figure out some way and really have part of the discussion, what would the daytime usages be for that building, so we don't have a kind of a large, beautiful but empty building during the day on the side of the park. And so just in really figuring out use there so that it's a good symbiotic relationship with the park would be my main thing with that site, and if we can figure out the parking issue. The other site, I think, is also, I think, Dan, as you said, it's exciting that we could do both at the same time, that even if we develop that site, I think there's a lot of opportunity from a commercial perspective if we have a theater that's near light rail, that's on that spot, that it could also be a commercial type theater. I just keep thinking of Miniman's type, theater and restaurant, and so that it's good for both kind of the youth theater and more commercial. So I think there's good potential on both, and I definitely would support the staff looking at both options.
Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I would go with Councilmember Grady's suggestion of looking at all 3 areas. Mr. Cohen's property, for whatever potential it may have, the recycle, I think the argument for recycle and the argument against the P-patch, I think, are interchangeable, meaning, this is qualify as a major muscle move. Any major muscle move on the island will bring conflict with a particular group. You're going to have conflict with the P-patch folks, you're going to have conflict with the Mercerdale folks. The advantage of the Mercerdale property is that it's our property. The advantage of the plot property is that it's our property. And then Mr. Cohen's property is out there as I won't say an outlier, but it's different different issues. So my suggestion would be to direct staff for all three properties.
Others? I'll weigh in here. Let me parse the community center property a little bit first. I have wandered around, I think I did it with you one day. Grouse Mountain is being referred to, I would probably think is off limits. It's would obstruct views of neighbors to the west and generate serious fight there. The pea patch would generate a fight as well with the pea patch users. But in my looking at that area, I think there's a third option, but I don't know for sure. But that's the I'll call it the blackberry patch, and that resides sort of downhill from the pea patch and northeast of the top of the hill. My feeling would be that area, it's also closer to the parking lot of Luther Burbank, and so somewhat more desirable in that respect. So I would be in favor of staff having a look at the whole property, with recognition that there's a fight that comes with going anywhere there, but perhaps the least fight is with the blackberry patch. So that would be the direction I would suggest. But I would encourage looking at all three, and that's why I'm landing on this.
No,
I was going to try and figure out how to boil this down.
So all three or all five?
Yeah, well, not the top of the hill and not the pea patch in my mind.
I probably should have inserted this half an hour ago. Even at 2 sites or 3 sites, if we're really going to do this and do it in a sensible way, I'm going to need $5,000 of architectural planning time.
I was wondering when that was coming in.
So I can just go ahead and get somebody professionally to do this for us. I'll find it in the budget and come back to you, or because I don't know where in the budget I would allocate it right now, but we'll find it. And typically, a city manager does this level of analysis, but I want to let you know I'm going to go do it if you sent me off working on these sites. We don't have the in-house staff to do it. We don't have the expertise.
We'd look at...
You'll pick 2 sites or 3 sites here in a minute, but I'm just telling you I'll need to spend a little bit of money by June.
But Mr. Cohen would do his, correct?
Right, well, that's the point. He needs to do his own property, and because he knows what he wants to develop there.
But Rich has teed up the option of a purchase of his property as well, which, so the possibility exists of a city-controlled development on that site. Right, if Mr. Cohen's in favor of selling.
I would be inclined, don't direct me to go pursue that one yet. Let's see where we can go with Leon and his current thinking, and if I need to come back to you, I will. Because the notion of us getting in the development business is it's a major leap, and I would want to know more what that even sounds like before I propose it.
Plus, it does add a significant cost to the project. As soon as we go off city property, we're adding
there's land cost.
There's land cost,
and
that's
it's putting us in a role of doing something that we don't do.
That's money we don't have. So you're immediately talking about having to go out and raise a significant chunk of money to pay for the land. But we do need to. I mean, we need to be very specific on what we're asking staff to do, because if we're trying to, what I gather just listening to the 4 people who have mentioned the community center property, so there's a majority in the council who wants to have staff look at the community center property, but I think that Mike and Jane mentioned the pea patch, and Bruce mentioned. Well, but I'd like to. I'd like to narrow it down if we can. I mean, if we're talking about the blackberry patch part of the hill, that's one thing. I mean, I'm just. But let's make a decision.
Mr. Mayor, why don't you throw it out and we'll do some thumbs up?
Well, yeah, so let me try here. So first, I haven't heard any objection to the city working further on this. And so I think we are moving forward with YTN project at this point. I think there is I got to give Tana first dibs, and then you, can I just try a little bit more here? And I've clearly heard that there's debate about which properties, either 2 or 3, would anybody slice it differently? Dan, I guess, and Dan suggesting that if we're going to look at community center property, he wants to slice more carefully there before we arrive at a decision. Are there any other
May I suggest one thing, Mr. Mayor? Okay. Just put the community center as one project, and let Rich look at all 3 areas, because I suspect terrain may have something to do with the feasibility of one over the others.
You really need a good site planner to work with it.
All right, let's get, so I hear that. You had a quick one, or you had one, and Jane had one, and Mike has one, and then we'll try and get this to boil down to something.
Yeah, I was going to say similar to what Mike said, that, you know, if we really want YTN to stay here and to move forward, they probably are on a timeline, depending on how the school district moves forward. And I would just imagine from a fundraising point of view and from a building point of view, a existing flat land in town is probably a lot cheaper and easier to build on than a muddy, hillside in the park. And so we may very well explore that and find out that that is our preferred site, that we would love them to be there, and that's going to be an additional $3 million for them for a performing arts center. So I just think we need to also keep in mind what what is realistic and what is possible, and make sure that we don't price them out of our community.
Okay. Jane?
Well, I have 2 daughters and 2 stepdaughters who went through YTN, and I love the program. I really want YTN to stay on the island. I heard you say, as we discussed this, we're identifying it as the YTN project, but then people are throwing out the idea of shared, like, community theater. I think we need to clarify, are we talking about a YTN project or a YTN/community theater, shared facility, public-private somehow? Because I think that is important. If the city is providing land, then, we need to figure out how that might ultimately work. So, and in terms of the property at near the community center, I think it's up to somebody to figure out, or to analyze what would make sense there. I mentioned Grouse Mountain, or I don't want to get in trouble with all the pea patchers too, or ruin people's views, but I do think there's a lot of potential of property up in that area that most Mercer Islanders hardly ever go up there, and they would not miss it as they might the hillside and part of Mercerdale.
Okay. Mike, and then back to Dan.
Thanks, Bruce. I, too, have had a couple kids go through Youth Theater Northwest, and they also play sports. So sports and Youth Theater Northwest are not mutually exclusive. And I mention the mutual exclusivity because we have gone under a couple of assumptions that I would like to have staff test out, and that's that somehow the TOD and this project that is yet to be defined are mutually exclusive, and I don't see it that way.
Yeah, I don't assume that.
Good. And the other is we have a lot of property that the city owns, and I think maybe what we ought to do is focus on, okay, what really is the purpose and need, and what's the title of this project? So this gets to your question, Jane. And I think it's more along the Performing Arts Center title than it is strictly a Youth Theater Northwest project. And no offense to Youth Theater Northwest, but I think for us to generate interest in the community, I think it needs to have a broader scope and the purpose and need. So one, if it can be broader in scope of performing arts, and 2, I think we should only focus on city-owned property. If Mr. Cohen wants to do something with his property, that's certainly his privilege, but I'm not interested in spending a whole lot of time trying to make his property attractive for whatever purpose. Take no offense to that, but, private sector, public sector. We own a lot of property both at Luther Burbank, at the community center. Again, I still think the possibility of doing a multi-use project with the school district, in my mind, should still be on the table. So to what extent we can find a way to use city, and I use city in a broad term, city-owned property only, is certainly going to save us money, and it's certainly going to make it easier for us to move forward with a performing arts type center. Thank you. Dan?
I think YTN was the one who originally raised the idea of making it a performing arts center. So let's be clear that it's not, this is their idea. It wasn't even our idea, our staff's idea. So they're
what's the purpose of making that statement?
I'm just pointing it out.
We're in this together to try to find a site for them. So I don't know that we needed to do that.
Fine. So YTN is fully supportive of the notion of a performing arts center. I think that I just encourage the council to try to narrow this down. We've got a finite project here that we need to work on. I think Tana's point is an extremely good one, that if you try to build it up near the community center on any part of that property we've been talking about, it adds significantly to the cost of this project. We all know most of the area up there is filled. Those of us who were on the council when the community center was built, know how much money was spent moving that fill out of the hole, which is now the community center, and moving it into the area behind it. That's all built on fill. It'll be a huge project to now have to do something up there, in my opinion. And the whole notion of doing it down at the recycling center is that you can do it there without impinging on the park. And that's huge. And it's without getting P-patchers upset, without getting people in Luther Burbank upset. As soon as there's no other city property out there which isn't going to get somebody upset. And I'm not saying that the recycling center won't get some people upset, but Harry Levitt was here earlier tonight, and I'm sure all of you know that Harry used to run the recycling center property. And I was talking to Harry about this last week, and I told him, there's some talk about Youth Theater Northwest going in there. He said, that's fantastic, because that'd be such a phenomenal use of the recycling center property that he devoted so much of his life to. And my guess is that a lot of other people feel the same way. That's really taking the legacy of what was done at the recycling center, which was really so far ahead of its time when that thing went up, and now turning that into a continued constructive use for the community. So I just encourage the council to just narrow this down, give staff some power to move forward and look at our best option here. And if it doesn't work out, then we can start looking at some other things. But I'm just very concerned that we're going to just widen this thing to a point where we lose sight of the objective.
Okay, I don't think there's any debate that it's that I spoke too narrowly by calling it the YTN project. It's a Performing Arts Center project. Anybody going to battle back on that? Okay. I think there are 3 sites that are amongst those we are debating whether they ought to be on the table or not, and I'm going to just ask for a show of hands on each of the sites as a way of getting us to move forward here, unless anybody has a horrible objection to that. Debbie, you're the only person who's been pretty quiet around here. If you want to weigh in here before I do.
Do you want me to weigh in?
I am happy to have you do it if you want.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity because I've been listening to fellow council members and obviously some great points raised, and it has narrowed my thinking. I would like to eliminate Luther Burbank from the discussion, and I think there's principled issues there, and I think there's very clear financial issues there. I go back to the discussions that we have had for months about improving the vibrancy of our downtown, about being able to park your car once, go to dinner, go to the theater, about the buses that come in and out of downtown, both school district and even hopefully continuing the Metro service, that are going to give people access to that Performing Arts Center. Granted, you can walk from those sites to Luther Burbank. However, I don't want my 15-year-old daughter walking in the dark between the train station and a site on Luther Burbank. And, you know, I could try to couch that in all kinds of terms, but that's just the blunt truth of it unless we change that particular pathway. And that's just one of many reasons. So if you ask me to narrow it down, I keep it downtown. I keep it accessible not only to the youth, but also to the population in those in the buildings that are going up, to so many of the seniors who may or may not choose at some point to live downtown so that they can leave their cars and they've got a great liberal arts and vibrant community just within walking distance. So 1,000 reasons I'm taking Luther Burbank off the table in my own mind.
Okay. So let me do this. What I'm going to do is say we're going to do thumbs up, thumbs down on the recycling center site first, which I think is the easy one. And before I ask for that, I want any other comments you want to make, please, for votes one direction or another on each of these. So recycling center site, anybody want to say more? Okay. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Recycling center site's in. Okay. Leon Cohen site. And I'm not going to specify whether it's TOD plus YTN or just YTN. It's just whether we're looking at that site. For the Performing Arts Center, yes, thank you. So Leon Cohen site, anybody want to say anything before we, everybody's already voting, so here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4 up, 2 down, 1 sideways. Okay?
4, 3, 1?
Yep. 4, 2, 1.
4, 2, 1, okay, and that's Cohen site as Performing Arts.
Performing Arts Center. Community Center site. More passion on this one. Anybody want to say anything more? There's been discussion each way. 4 up, 3 down. Anything else you need from us?
And when you say community center site, I am understanding that a little more broadly. There's a lot of public ground in and around the center, and I would have a site planner look at what the possibilities are and best options.
And I will be very clear, and I suspect the others would too. This is absolutely not saying that's where we're putting a Performing Arts Center. It is merely saying that as you begin to look at things, you may look at that.
Okay.
That's far cry from saying go build it there regardless of the fact that it costs some larger amount to do it than it does to put it someplace else.
The scope of work that I would give a site planner / architect would be to do just some simple site planning and provide the pros and cons of each site in terms of capacity for the use, potential costs, any environmental issues that we don't know about, and access. And just let it go there. I don't want to spend a lot of money, but I want to know what are the sort of the key things that would rule a site out, and then come back to you in June.
It seems to me, and others may run away on this too, I think, and specifically because it's not just a YTN facility, you're going to have to put at least a little bit of scope around what does a community performing arts center look like, and what are the parking requirements that actually go with that.
I think I'm pretty sure Manny has a lot of that already.
Okay.
So I think the building capacity and the scoping of what they need and what a performing arts center is readily available. It's how does it fit? How do you make it fit onto a site?
Well, and I guess I'll throw in the other thing that's got me a little bit concerned here is that I've heard that it fits with a TOD project, but I'm sure they don't wait until 6 o'clock to start their programs, and a lot of commuters aren't back to their cars until 6 o'clock. And so does this really work if you tie the two together, or is that just a kind of a pipe dream?
We'd have to evaluate that as well.
Yep. Okay.
But Keith, can I understand what, I'm dealing with the Leon Cohen property, what exactly we're asking staff to do? Because that is potentially it's a much larger undertaking.
That's a great point, Dan. And Leon, forgive me, I'm going to probably not do justice to your proposal by any means, because I'm going to do this real fast. But Leon has developed a proposal already, and maybe it's changed, and if so, great. That's, we'll look at the changes. But a proposal on that site that includes U Theater Northwest, tiny amount of sort of retail, I think there's restaurant function in there, parking, and condominiums. Parking below level, and then YTN, and then condominiums above. So it truly is a public-private partnership and mixed use. So it's complex. Those kinds of projects, complex project, Leon, I mean, these aren't easy to put together.
Plus, it's a 6 or 7 story project.
Right. At least the last iteration was about 6 stories.
Which is a variance, yes.
More than a variance. I mean, the whole thing is a variance because the property, the 5-story zone doesn't even exist on that property right now. So I mean, that's, the council has made its decision, but that's why it's so much easier for...
We're voted, let's move on. We voted, let's move on.
The council, it's so much easier for staff to engage with Leon on a TOD project than to engage with him on a mixed-use development project.
Well, and there's very little role for us in the mixed-use project because it's not the city.
So staff has marching orders that are pretty broad at this point around that. Go see if you can come back to something.
Those parts that I don't understand, I'll just
make them up.
Deal with it.
Make them up as you go along. Public who are here for YTN, we are done with that issue. Thank you for your time and coming out and making your case this evening. We're going to take a break for 10 minutes. We're going to come back at 8:55 and do I-90.
Cue video.
Meeting will come back to order. All right, we move now to Agenda Bill 4824, Status Report on City Work Plan to Oppose I-90 Tolling. Noel Treat, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Noel Treat, Deputy City Manager. I'm here tonight to give you a quick status report on our I-90 Tolling Work Plan. So I'll work through that status report and then take any questions and any discussion that you've got. So first, on the WashDOT environmental study, I spoke with Craig Stone at the end of last week. They still don't know for sure when they're going to make an EA versus EIS decision. He wasn't sure exactly what the timeline was going to be for that decision either. He hoped sometime by the middle of April, but it sounded like it could drag on longer. Same thing with the EAG, that group, they still don't have a plan or a timeline for when that group will be pulled together. The mayor and I met with the governor's office to brief them on the overall tolling issue and to advocate for a broader EIS rather than the EA. They didn't state any position in that meeting, but promised to take it back and look at it further, and we'll be following up with them in the near future as well. We're currently seeking to meet with the new Secretary of WashDOT, and we'll see if we're successful in doing that. I do know that it's difficult, given the legislative session, to get on her schedule, but we're doing the best that we can. And then finally, related to the environmental study, WashDOT, as I've mentioned previously, is preparing to do a survey of all Mercer Island addresses. They now tell us that survey is going to go out in May. It had been planned earlier. It's now pushed out till May. Litigation strategy, we're continuing to monitor that Portsmouth case, which I think is now set for summary judgment May 1st, and we'll see what comes out of that. On the state legislature outreach front, our lobbyist is continuing to work with legislators to try and validate the likelihood that the legislature would approve tolling. It hasn't had a lot of success there because a lot of legislators won't engage in that discussion at this point because it's not something that's actively before them this session. So we've had some difficulty in getting those conversations going. The House budget did come out with a proviso regarding mitigation. It was similar to the bill that we saw earlier. Our lobbyists advocated for an EIS on our behalf, as have others, but at this point it doesn't look like that proviso is going to include EIS language. And then finally, there was, in the Senate transportation budget, a proposed $3 million budget cut to the WashDOT tolling division's budget. Our initial analysis is that probably won't affect anything they do in I-90 in terms of our study. We're still looking at that, but it looks like the I-90 study is separately funded at about $3 million right now, so they would have funding. That would be enough funding probably to even do an EIS, so that funding is there, and this cut to the WashDOT and their staff probably won't affect that. On the federal approval front, we had a good meeting, I think, with Congressman Adam Smith 2 weeks ago. He has not taken a position yet on tolling, but he had a lot of good questions for us. His staff has continued to follow up with us and with our lobbyists to ask for more information. He's particularly interested in the legal question of whether I-90 can be tolled to Fund 520, and that's something he's looking to us to provide more information on as we finish our analysis. We have conducted outreach and have ongoing discussions with every member of the Washington delegation, both our senators and our 10 House representatives. We got a response letter today from Federal Highways Administration, basically thanking us for our letter and letting us know that they won't issue any decision until the NEPA process is completed, which, as you know, is at the end of the year at the earliest, if not later. So they didn't respond to really any of the merits that we laid out in our letter at all. And we're going to continue to push there and try and engage them in a conversation about that. And then finally, we got an initial response to our public records request with WashDOT related to their request for federal approval, and we're working through that to see what else we can learn there. On coalition building, we've got discussions underway, some very positive ones with, we've had some with WashDOT, certainly with King County and PSRC, with Sound Cities Association, the Port, and a number of cities, as well as Yakima County. So we're working with these groups towards the idea of stepping back and doing a broader regional EIS on tolling instead of the very narrowly focused EA. And we're getting some positive responses from all these parties at this point. And we'll continue to work forward on that. As you might have seen in the email, the City of Newcastle actually passed a resolution very similar to the resolution that you discussed at our last meeting. They added a provision about gas tax, but they adopted that at their council meeting last week. And then finally, on public information, Councilmember Bertlin has led an effort to develop a draft community outreach plan. We'll be finishing the details of that and getting a schedule put together in the near future. But it basically will call for us to have some town halls, some more informal opportunities for public engagement, as well as meeting with different organizations on the island to provide more information about not only I-90 but other city issues as well. So that's my report. Any questions?
Thank you. Mike Searle, then Mike Grady.
Hey, no, if you'll go back to the status report, the first one on status report. So I have a very, on the House transportation budget has identified $5.4 million for a comprehensive tolling study. What does that mean? Is that a comprehensive tolling study? Is that an EIS or an EA?
It could be either.
Right.
Is what
So
we're
what, is that any different than the comprehensive environmental study that WashDOT was directed to do?
No, the language is basically the same as the older legislation from, I
So
think,
is there
last
any
year.
reason why, can you tell me, give me any insight on why they're not being specified to do an EIS in this document?
In the current budget, we made a push to have an EIS specifically called for, and what we heard back from legislators was that would be too prescriptive and that it's the agency's role to make that determination.
Well, now that's wrong. It's the legislature's role to direct WashDOT.
Well, under NEPA and SEPA, the way it's currently written, it is up to the administrative agency. They have an environmental official whose duty it is under both state law and federal law to make a determination about whether to do an EA or an EIS. Now, that doesn't mean the legislature couldn't decide to order an EIS, but the general practice is, and the existing law is, that it's the administration that makes that decision.
The Portsmouth litigation, do you have a timeline? What's the next stage when we can kind of weigh in?
They're going to have summary judgment on May 1st. They're going to have that hearing on May 1st. That doesn't necessarily mean the judge will issue a decision that day, but both parties will come and present their arguments, and then the judge may issue a decision then. Generally, on a complicated summary judgment, it can be weeks or a couple months before you see a decision from the judge. And then at that point, it would start the clock ticking under Virginia law for the losing party to appeal to the appellate court.
And when would we jump in there? So on May 1st, they make a judgment. If it goes to the left or to the right, we can make a determination.
Yeah,
if it's good for us or bad for us. If it's bad for us, under that scenario,
to the right.
To the left. I got that. Are we engaged? Are we leaning forward?
Yes, and our city attorney has been in touch with the city of Portsmouth's attorney, and has checked in with them regularly. We're getting copies of all their briefings. And our next opportunity, if we wanted to think about doing anything, would be at the point that a decision's issued. If a party appeals it, then we'd want to look at what the court decision was, who was appealing it, what they were arguing, and then we could make a decision about any involvement there.
And who will do that for us? Meaning, is that in-house, or is that contracted?
We're tracking that, but we would have to contract that out.
Okay.
Yeah. If we actually do something, we'd have to contract it out. The decision about whether to do it might be made with Katie's advice, and then it would be a decision by the council. Because it will involve a substantial amount of money if we want to take that step, potentially.
Right. Around May. You went a little bit too quick for me on this FHWA response letter. Will you go into more detail?
Sure. The mayor told me to go quickly, by the way, so.
Yeah. Mike,
yes, I'm sorry, and I'll send.
I know what you're going to say.
I received this just late this afternoon, so I haven't had a chance to send the email out. I'll send copies to those of you that haven't seen it. We got as you recall, our attorney sent a letter to FHWA a number of weeks ago in which we said, you and all need to make sure that an EIS is performed before any decisions are made about tolling, and we don't believe that current federal law allows I-90 to be tolled to pay for construction on 520. And so WashDOT wrote back to us today and simply said, thank you for your letter. We're not going to... FHWA, I'm sorry. Thank you for your letter. We're not going to make any decisions until the NEPA process concludes, which won't happen until probably the end of this year.
It was literally a one paragraph.
It was.
Noel isn't exaggerating how brief it was. That was almost verbatim.
It was, yeah.
It's like 2 sentences.
Yeah.
It was from Washington. It wasn't local.
Okay, and NEPA process, you're talking about the EA/EIS?
Yes, whichever that turns out to be. What they're telling us now is we aren't going to make a decision about whether this tolling is allowed under federal law until the state goes through the whole course of their environmental
Are they doing any concurrent activities, or is it NEPA's finished, then it's in the FHWA's inbox?
I think that's how they're saying it works for them, which is what we were warned about, that's kind of, they're a fairly bureaucratic agency, and that's how they work.
This is one instance where that's not too bad. Oh, boy. Okay, the WashDOT public records. So did you get a bunch of records? Is that the deal?
I did. What I asked for was all of WashDOT's email and records related to their request for approval from FHWA or their correspondence seeking approval.
So we've got that online?
Sure, I can send you that.
Put it on our I-90 tolling webpage to give it free access to all these folks who are really...
We can do that, yeah. This is batch number 1. They're going to send us some more, but I think we can add a link for that.
Great. I think that would really help us in our review process. We're all kind of on the same team.
I've done an initial read-through. There's nothing at this point startling in there. It's fairly general correspondence. We're interested in using value pricing program to toll I-90, and here's why. And I mean, we haven't found anything yet that anyone would find highly valuable, but we're still looking, and this is only their first batch of disclosure. They owe us a couple more batches that we'll get over time.
I'd like to talk about this coalition building and how do we have I'd like to get more specific on where we are with all these different organizations and what organizations are out there that we haven't hit, what organizations are out there that we have hit and we've hit dry, or we've hit pay dirt or dry dirt. Because, I mean, we've got a lot of connections here on the council. Maybe I'm just not privy to it, but it seems to me that instead of bullet 1 coalition building, we're making progress. I mean, we need to go kaboom, 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 right down the yellow pages of all these different organizations, of all these different lobbying groups, and kind of quantify it on a scale of 1 to 10, or red light, green light, yellow light.
I'm sorry?
Is that what the steering
committee is working on that, yeah. And I can tell you we've got SCA this week. We've got to get that sorted. We've got the Mercer Island Mayor's meeting this week.
The system's almost done.
I'm sorry?
Like Washington. You're the Mercer Island Mayor.
what did I say?
You said Mercer Island.
Oh, yeah, that meeting. I have that every night. Just me. So there's a lot cooking this week around that, and completely threw me off track with that. I hear what you're saying. What you're talking about is probably could be an hour conversation. What we're trying to do here is a pretty tight update so that everybody, every meeting knew what was going on, but not turn it into a full agenda item. Happy to sit down and talk later with you in more detail about that, but I'm not sure that it makes sense for us to expand that, the topic right now into that. What we're trying to do is hold this to 15 minutes or so.
Mark, I would respect that then if I'd like to sit down with the steering committee or whomever, a representative of the steering committee or Noel himself, and let's go down the list. And
you should sit down with Noel at every opportunity that you want to.
Okay,
and Noel looks forward to that. I see his grimace.
We've had a few conversations, but I'm happy to keep you updated.
We didn't specify. Let's have another one about the coalition building. On this action update item, kind of on the legal part, is the memorandum. What action are we going to take on the memorandum, or are we taking, or when is that going to happen?
The 1976 Memorandum of Agreement process, I think we don't know yet. That's a strategy decision that we're going to need to make. I think we're going to want to see how some of these other pieces and some of these other legal issues fall into place first, and then we're going to need to think strategically about when we engage that process.
That process really be hard to invoke it until there's a proposal made by the state, and they haven't done that yet, other than to say tolling. But they are well aware, and they acknowledge that they have to sit down at the table with us and the other signatories before anything can go forward.
So are you talking, this would be after the fact, or this would be an opportunity to be proactive with that MA group?
I think that it'll happen most likely later in the year. But right now, we don't know exactly what the state's proposing. Everything has slowed down, if you've noticed, and it's just going to take a little more time.
I would also like to see on a status report status on the initiative, that the no-toll initiative. I think we've got some mutual interest on that, and I don't have enough time to track it or understand it, so. That's why I'm asking. I think that's a relevant.
Yeah, and if something changes with that, I will update the council. At this point, it's out for signature. I forget the exact deadline, but the next time we'd hear about it would be if it collects enough signatures to make it on the ballot, and I will track that and let you know.
Can we move on to
the last thing I have is the scoping. WashDOT is supposed to come out with something on the scoping request in the springtime.
They've got to decide whether they're doing an EA or an EIS. Is that what you mean?
He's talking about the compilation of all the scope and comments on their book, and they told us it would come out in April.
Yeah, that will come out
probably more like May now.
Just before or around the time they make their EA EIS decision. Because what they have to do is they have to go through all those comments and have at least a general response to them as they make that EA versus EIS decision. So we should see that around the time we see their decision.
So is that just an FYI for us? Is there any action that we potentially would have to take?
No, we will get that. They will send that to us, and it doesn't give us any legal recourse at that point.
There's nothing actionable.
No.
It's just good information. We go through the comments and we'll hear what everybody said.
Yeah.
And how many people said it.
Okay, that's all I have.
Yeah, but I'm happy to talk with you more to give you whatever else you need.
Mr. Grady.
Thank you, Bruce. Just a couple quick things to know. Thanks for the update. I think to what extent we can fast-track K&L Gates and get this federal litigation issue and the paper to us quickly is to our benefit. Specifically, Secretary LaHood is going to be in the state on Thursday of this week
Wednesday and Thursday. I think he's, I think he's speaking with the legislature and the governor on Wednesday.
He is, and the primary purpose is to talk about the CRC, but I think, if there's a way we can get either Congressman Smith's staff or someone from the governor to get that piece of information to Secretary Hood, that would be to our advantage, because he's on the record as being opposed to tolling federal facilities. And I am not of the, as you know, I am not of the ilk to wait for WashDOT to make decisions, because we're continuing to put the ball in their court, and it's been, history has proven us to be at fault when we do that, because their decisions, one, tend not to be of the ones that we like, and two, they tend not to incorporate all the needs, particularly the local communities. So I think to what extent we can front load, similar to the discussion we had with Congressman Smith, we can front load that decision on federal tolling now and get a decision out of U.S. DOT, not out of federal highways, out of Olympia or some office in headquarters, but out of LaHood's office. That's going to be to our advantage, and that's going to push the state to look at something other than tolling, which is where we want to go. And quite frankly, to see that our representatives have got $5.2 million as a line item, budget item, to pursue an EIS, quite frankly, should speak volumes to us that, the state is willing to spend a lot of money to study something that they know deep down is not going to work. So to what extent we can get a decision on what is not going to work and start focusing on alternative finance mechanisms, that's to our advantage, as opposed to playing this hide-and-seek game. I'm also curious as to why WashDOT is doing a survey of everybody on Mercer Island, and where in the heck they're getting the money to do that, because it's my understanding that was not a part of the EA process.
I don't think it's part of a traditional EA process, but you might recall that the state legislation requiring them to do an environmental study said they had to do significant public outreach. So I think they know that on this one they have to do something more than they'd normally do even under an EA process. So I think that's why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And then on the Hood's visit, as you know, we've worked with our lobbyist, and we've talked with Adam Smith's staff. We're trying to see if there's an opportunity there, but so far that hasn't worked out, but we're still working on it.
Yeah, and again, I think to what extent we can get that legal one or two pager down to the governor's office, that's to our advantage. And just to echo Mike's comments about a matrix, I think to what extent, the steering committee, we work hard to get that matrix together, so we identify where the groups, who's going to go after them, and just systematically go down that list. That'll give everybody an opportunity to not only help, but also to hit as many people as we possibly can, not just on Mercer Island, but surrounding communities and the delegation. And I understand we're going to talk about that later. The last thing I do want to mention is I do have a meeting with the governor on the 17th of April. And I'm mentioning that because it's on other issues, but what I would like to do is have from the council and from staff a bulleted list of what we want, so that given the brief period of time that I'll have with the governor, I can pass that to him, including the letter that I just mentioned that I hope we already had, and that's the legal piece on the federal tolling options.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, we'll pull that together.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? All right, Noel, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We move to Agenda Bill 4820, Planning Commission Annual Work Program. George.
Thank you. So, get out of your way there. So, Exhibit 1 to the agenda bill is the work program as recommended by your Planning Commission. The work there can be put into two buckets. The first bucket is appeals and permits. That's ongoing work that the Planning Commission is assigned to do through Title 19. A little bit more on that in a second. The second bucket of work is the legislative items. Items get into the legislative bucket, as I'll call it there, either through the council's planning work session or through Planning Commission's recommendation. So there's 5 items, or A through E, on the agenda bill. The first one is school standards in the P zone or the public zone. Originally, staff was looking at doing this work in 2013 and bringing it forward to the Planning Commission in 2013 as well. After further review, staff is recommending, and it's part of staff's recommendation in the agenda bill here, that we do some work in 2013, but we bring it forward to the Planning Commission in 2014.
2014. The second item, item B, are code text amendments related to code enforcement provisions. There's a bunch of code enforcement provisions throughout the municipal code, not just the zoning code, but things like the sewer code. So we're looking at consolidating code enforcement provisions into one nice, neat, clean code. And because that's included in Title 19, it's got to go through the Planning Commission. We're looking at doing that in the latter part of 2013 as well. The third item is just typical code maintenance on the zoning code. We've brought this forward to the City Council a few times in the last 6 or 7 years that I've been here, and it's just fixing code, just things that need to be fixed. It's like conflicts or broken links in the code, so that our customers have some assurance when they're looking at the code. You know, what are those provisions exactly? We find those all the time as we're working through it, because there's hundreds of pages in the zoning code. Item D and E, the fourth and fifth items, that's recommended by your Planning Commission. The first one is looking at the Planning Commission removing their role in permits and appeals. And again, that was recommended by the Planning Commission, but it's certainly supported by our insurance company, by our city attorney's office, and by staff. But it would just be looking at that and bring a recommendation forward to City Council on that. And then the last one is evaluating Planning Commission's role in regional items such as I-90 tolling and others. They're looking at potential impacts to the town center and businesses and providing a recommendation to the council prior to approval of these regional projects. Staff is recommending that that stays with the City Council as well. There's two recommended motions. The Planning Commission's recommended motion on page 3 of the agenda bill, and then there's staff's recommended motion, which shows the two tweaks that staff's recommending. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, questions. Donna? Donna?
On the school standards in the P-zone, when is the timing for the fire station changes in the P-zone? And are those the same or different? And how does this school changes versus what we need to do for the fire station, how does that interrelate?
We did the rezone, so it's now got that P-zoning. I'm not aware of any changes this year to the P-zone that would affect the fire station.
Are we going to redefine the P-zone?
Well, the two things that happen. One is writing the text regulations associated with a zone, for the P-zone, and then the other is the actual action of changing a zone, so rezoning. The fire station has been rezoned to P. We did that. Any changes in the text that will occur with the P-zone, and what you're seeing in this is a recommendation that happen, staff work in 2013, Planning Commission and Council in 2014. Whatever happens will also affect the fire station. We are confident that wherever that will go, the fire station won't have an issue with it. I mean, it's within the building parameters that we would expect those zoning regulations to require.
So is the regulations of the P-zone going to be based on what the design of the fire station is, or is it going to be the design based on what the regulations that we come up with are?
My understanding
yes and yes, which the fire station will be consistent with the regulations you come up with. We're not worried about the fire station and how it's going to be cited in the way those texts, the code text will be written. The big issue is school zone property, and I think what you're going to see is because school properties are already so grandfathered in a, for a long time, non-conforming way because of impervious surface, that when we rewrite the P-zone for schools, it's going to be taking what largely are existing conditions and making them legal. There will be some adjustments, particularly, I think, in setbacks. There may be some discussion of green building standards, but I don't think you're going to see any big difference from what they already are allowed to do because you sort of grandfathered them into it. And the fire station, I think, will will be just fine.
I was just going to add one other thing on the timing, sorry. Noel Treat, Deputy City Manager. It's possible, depending on the pace with which the new P-zone regulations are developed, that the fire station's permit applications and things will all come in under the existing, I think this is probably the most likely scenario. Those are probably all going to come in under the existing P-zone code. So our fire station will be built under that code, and so the new code may or may not be based on the fire
That's a
station.
great point. It may be, timing-wise, it becomes a completely moot point on the fire station. It'd be real important for schools, but the fire station might not be.
Okay, not to beat this one too much, but I know the school district is kind of coming up with some preliminary designs of what a school could look like, and that's not, I just want to make sure that we're not slowing that down in any way, that it's going to cost them money to redo something based on our zoning
That's
changes.
exactly why we want to do the staff work in 2013, working with school staff and their architects and planners to make sure where they are going is not inconsistent with where we think the zoning texts go. They'll kind of go hand in hand. But we would like to get all that to stand still when they've decided to take a package to the voters.
Right.
And then after the vote, then you go through the public process of the rezones. After the vote.
Other questions for George? Mike?
George, I note there's no work here with the Shoreline Master Plan. Do they anticipate any work coming back to them during this year?
It's up to you guys. So,
okay, yes, I do.
Well, as you know, the S&P's in ecology's basket right now. We're waiting to hear back from them, and then once we get comments back from them, we'll bring it back to City Council. So ecology is going to say, hey, you need to change these, and we'd like you to change these parts of your code. That would come back to City Council. Right now, it's not anticipated that Council will kick that back to the Planning Commission for review.
Okay, so that answered my question. So it's to our discretion whether it goes back to the Planning Commission or not, based on the comments that we're going to get from ecology.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Mike Grady? Mike Cyril, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't understand the number D, letter D, the pros and cons of that. Same thing with E, if you can talk to that, George.
Well, and let me piggyback on your comment. You made a comment about our insurer and staff having a position about this. It wasn't clear to me that you were supporting the existing situation, or were you supporting the change as suggested? I understand, but
staff is supporting, and the insurance company and the city attorney's office is supporting a change to the current code.
Okay, so what's proposed in the work plan is supported by these other entities, the staff and the insurance?
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. And then if you could go to Mike's.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
Well,
explain items D and E.
D and E, right.
Okay.
So we're losing a level of review, it sounds like, that is being recommended.
On D?
On D. I mean, I fully respect the attorney and your review, but I have a level of comfort having citizens of the island being part of that review process. So I'm wondering why you're suggesting that we cut that part out.
Well, again, it's Planning Commission looking at that. We support it because the alternative, and this is what the vast majority of other jurisdictions have gone to.
Without saying that, but without the insurance, without saying everybody else is doing it, the merits on why we're wanting to change.
Why the Planning Commission is recommending it.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Because it would go to a hearing examiner. A hearing examiner who's very impartial, doesn't necessarily live on the island, who has experience looking at the code sections and applying it very neutrally and saying, this is how the code applies or doesn't apply. There's not some inherent biases because of where they live or what they've seen or haven't seen, or they know everyone. They're paid to do this. They're professionals. They do it for a living. They're essentially a judge. So it's go to traffic court. You'd rather have a judge than maybe a planning commission taking a look at that.
So I'm not familiar with these hearing examiners.
Is that okay, Katie? Yeah, all right.
So hearing examiners are their,
Katie Knight, your city attorney, we contract with Seattle Hearing Examiners offices, and they're usually attorneys who come, and they're basically administrative law judges who sit, and we submit essentially briefs on both sides to explain the different issues, and then they make a determination with regard to the particular issue based on our code.
And the hearing examiner structure is very common and has been in place for many, many years here and most other jurisdictions. Most appeals of land use decisions at the city, correct me if I'm wrong, but most do go to a hearing examiner.
Correct.
Almost none go to the planning commission or the city council. It in effect is going to a professional lawyer/judge. So it's basing it on the law.
so what goes to the planning, commission or to the city council?
Permit applications, not the appeals.
There's a list at the bottom of that page right there. Page 2 of the agenda bill.
I'd like to hear discussion on this. I don't, I kind of,
But this is just their work plan.
Well, that's true, yeah. So,
They'll come back to us on the merits.
okay. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that, that's right. And you want to talk about E on why you're suggesting a motion that we eliminate?
Sorry. Yes, I can speak to it.
Actually, George, you can, but I wrote the paragraph, so
Thanks.
I'll let you off the hook.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make the point to the council that the planning commission can recommend this. It's your decision. It's your planning commission. And I wanted to make sure you understood that, at least at the city of Mercer Island, since I've been here, and I think even before I was here, the role of at the city for dealing with intergovernmental relations and these kinds of big regional project issues and how the city engages is always been by the city council. It's your prerogative. Planning Commission has not done this work. And so I use this as an opportunity to make sure you understood that.
Well, and just wanted to point out, too, that if an I-90 issue were to really affect our comprehensive plan, the council could kick it down to the Planning Commission to have them do some work on it, correct?
Absolutely. You always have the choice to ask your planning commission to go do whatever work projects you want. I just think it would be cart before the horse to have your planning commission that reviews comprehensive plan changes doing the implementation work of regional projects in intergovernmental relations. It's just got to be the reverse. The council's got to drive that.
Debbie, and then Mike.
Yeah, I'm just supporting, obviously, a lot of what Rich and George have commented. No, I was not there for this meeting. I was actually at a Youth and Family Services event. But based on some conversations, I support removing item 1E for the very reasons that have been articulated. The council needs to retain the analysis and policy side of reviewing any major regional activities such as this. And I think the conversation that we just had about I-90 is a perfect case in point. I'm not prepared at this point to recommend that we would be including yet another decision-making body such as the Planning Commission in that activity, and that the Planning Commission remains focused on the implementation here at a local level based on the policy and analysis decisions conducted by the council.
I'm hoping we're kind of at the point of a motion. Mike, is that where you were going to go?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I move to accept the proposed 2013 Planning Commission Work Plan as presented in Exhibit 1 with the following amendments. 1, change the scheduling of Planning Commission review of item 1A to the first half of 2014. And 2, eliminate item 1E.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carries. Thank you, George. Thank you, Rich. Move on to Agenda Bill 4823, fourth quarter 2012 financial status report and 2013-2014 budget adjustments. Chip Porter, welcome.
Good evening. First time I've seen you this year, I believe.
Yeah, you've been
You had enough of me last year. I was giving you a break.
Well, welcome.
I had like a 10 to 12-minute presentation, but it's late. Do you want the 60-second version, then cut over to the budget adjustments? I'm seeing sufficient nods. Okay.
I'd give you 10 minutes. I'd give you 10 minutes.
No, I'm not going to give you
Name that tune in 60 seconds.
I will hit the highlights very quickly, then cut over to budget adjustments.
All right.
Okay? Bottom line, general fund, the way you break this down, you add up all the revenues and the beginning fund balance, the beginning cash we had in 12, and subtract the expenditures, we had $447,000 left over. What that means is we did not have to tap our rainy day fund. Yay. And that's how I define success for last year. When you break down that $447,000, over $300,000 of it is what's called budgeted beginning fund balance. In other words, when we went through the budget process last year, I knew we would have expenditure savings in the general fund, and I needed that to help balance the budget. I use it to fund one-time costs, okay, and one-time services in 13 and 14. So I sliced it away. It's already budgeted in your 13 and 14 budget. Another $34K is reserved for various purposes. I'll give you an example. $26K that we received in property tax last year from that 0.5% bank capacity, it's reserved for Left One long-term care reserve in the general fund. And then the balance of the $447 is $105,000. That's an expenditure carryover request, which we'll talk about shortly. Okay? Again, we did not tap a rainy day fund last year. We budgeted, we had balanced the budget assuming a $350,000 tap. We did not touch it. Couple of highlights. Utility tax, keep my eye on that. That's 16% of our total revenue in the general fund. It was down 1.4% or $50K. Why? That's all about Puget Sound Energy, our electric gas utility. That was down about 5%. Sales tax up, yay, 7.1%, not $185,000. However, almost $100,000 of that came from non-classified businesses, which I can't talk to you about, but it's when island residents buy expensive things and we get the sales tax from that. I think I can say that. Okay, sales tax, construction. In the good days, when things were just rocking here, it was almost 50% of our total sales tax receipts. It's down to 38%. It was up almost 5%, not surprisingly. Food services continues to do very well, up 9%, though it's only 7% of our total sales tax receipts. Retail and wholesale, trade, surprisingly, only up 2.7%. But overall, good. Development activity, keep an eye on this. Comparing 12 to 11 single-family residential permits, that's how I mostly focus on development activity, was up almost 6%. In 2012, total valuation was down slightly, but that's not bad news. Remember, in 11, the Aviara project added almost $27 million to total valuation. That was a huge project.
I'll jump in real quick.
Please.
Chip, the data coming in for the first quarter, first 4 months of this year is all looking very positive. We're getting lots of new housing starts and lots of remodels. Those are our bread and butter, and we're starting to see them come in. The front counter is getting busy. So while we're not going to claim victory yet, it's
Definitely
up.
Yeah, and not just a little bit. Let's see. Cut. Oh, just a bit of good news. Beautification fund. All of your business and occupation tax, B&O tax, goes to the beautification fund. That was up almost 15%, which I can't explain. I'm just happy. And so it's only $50K, but still, that generated almost $400,000 last year in the beautification fund. YFS, thrift shop. If you can believe this, $1.22 million last year. It's unbelievable. And I remember, it wasn't that long ago. It was down around $800,000, not that many years ago. $1.22 million. Fabulous. Okay, real quickly, REIT, real estate excise tax, up significantly, 18.2% or $333,000. Why? Two reasons. Number of property sales up almost 14% in 2012. And the number of property sales over $5 million, there were 6 of them. They generated $300,000 in REIT. That happens from time to time, can't predict it, and so it was a good year in REIT. What's that? Oh, sorry. There's a graph from Francie, and what I will point out, in 2010, you see the little blip. I can barely read it myself, 2.21 million. It goes up in 2010. That was Shorewood Apartments. When you take that away, you just see a nice little growth trend going on there for the past 3 years plus. Okay, there's some great project highlights. Oh, I got to stop. This is for Councilmember Grady's benefit, because we never talk about green stuff on CIP projects. Here's a great one. It not only is painted green for the most part, but this is a cool purchase that we did for the Parks Department. And it's a new diesel engine, a Tier 4 diesel engine, very clean, extraordinarily quiet, and much more fuel efficient. And it's a tractor mower that was purchased last year and done so within budget. Okay, budget adjustments. They begin on Exhibit 1 of your agenda bill, page 29, 30, and 31, I believe. And I have them broken into a couple of different categories. First, what's on the screen here are those which were previously approved by the council. We've already blessed them. Okay, so these are kind of no-brainers. I would just mention, for those that are curious, why is the $150,000 related to I-90 proposed tolling on there twice, right? Well, the money resides in the contingency fund. You have to appropriate a transfer of $150K from that fund to the general fund, and then you appropriate the spending of the $150 in the general fund. I know it's crazy, it double counts it, but that's just the way it works. And then you have already approved the summer celebration fireworks adjustment of $24,000, and last council meeting, I believe, the first sale property sale related cost of $100K to come from the property sale proceeds. The next group, just one new request is included in your packet. I included the memo, the presentation with the Public Safety Committee on March 21st of this year. This is just missed during the budget process. It fell through the cracks, and it's $30,000 to replace 10 defibrillators used by the fire department. There's a reserve set up for that. It's a little bit more than $32,000 and change, so there's enough money there. They need to replace those.
Just out of curiosity, sure. Chief Tubbs, if you wouldn't mind, I'm curious what happens to where do old defibrillators go to die? I got to get my microphone here.
I'm on now. Chief Tubbs. I don't know exactly where they go. We usually dispose of them through the vendor. We give them back to them for them to dispose of properly.
So they're no longer, you can't redistribute them to other locations around the city?
No, once they reach the end of their useful service life, the medical directors don't allow us to carry them under their license, and effectively everything that we're doing is under their license.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Finance uses them as paperweights.
Real quick question. When you say forgot to include them, does that mean just literally like in the paperwork?
It was planned. It had to be done, and it just fell through the cracks. Okay, the next group are what we call carryovers, stuff that was budgeted last year in various funds and needs to be carried over so we can complete the purchase or complete the project. I break into two kinds of carryovers: operating budget, okay, and capital, CIP budget-related carryovers. Here are three general fund carryovers, $28,000. This was actually approved last year. We owe some taxes to the state related to our recreation, amusement, and physical fitness services for 10 and 11. The reason we have not remitted that to them is because they were supposed to audit us last year and they couldn't get around to it. So it's supposed to happen this year. We wanted to do the audit first to verify some things before we cut a check. That's all it's about. Last year, December, the community center, they got almost $6,000 in auction proceeds dedicated to park special events. Because it's the end of the year, I want to dedicate that to funding 2013 special events. So just carry over that money and use it for that purpose. And then there's a remainder in the general fund of expenditure. This is expenditure savings is where it comes from, okay, of $49,000. So what I'm recommending is let's make this a contingency. I give it, for example, under the note column there, you've already used or committed about $125,000 of your $150,000 for the I-90 work plan, okay? You might need more. here's a contingency for that purpose. If you don't need it for that purpose, and you don't spend the full 150, we can use this to reduce the draw on the rainy day fund. Okay? It just gives you maximum flexibility. Okay?
My 2 cents, I kind of like that latter explanation that you gave, is I'm uncomfortable with just having $50,000 out there as a contingency to the contingency almost. My preference would be to pay down the contingency that we drew from for the I-90, and then if we need more draw, because of the I-90 issues, then we go through the draw process of where it's going to come from, and it also gives us an opportunity to focus where that money goes whenever we allocate it from the contingency fund.
Isn't this purely semantic?
It just forces us to do another appropriation, bunch of resolutions back and forth for the sake of creating paper.
Well, no.
Mike, you know you're going to spend the money. There's no way we're not going to spend the extra $48,000, and we're going to spend a lot more than that before this is done. If you recall, you wanted to spend $500,000.
It's all in the general
a few
fund,
weeks
right,
ago.
Chip?
Yeah.
It's
already there.
It's not like putting it to a different fund.
I'm sorry, all in the general fund. If it were money coming and going from a different fund, I would get the point, but it's all money just in the general fund.
Looking at your glide path, you're going to go through that $150,000 very quickly.
Yeah,
exactly. So
it's already spent.
All right. Remaining operating budget carryovers was about almost $10,000 in beautification fund. Yeah.
You just finished up that chart without finishing it. The engineering study of slope movement behind the maintenance center, 32,000?
Yeah, I'm coming to that right now. I'm coming to it.
Getting ahead.
Okay, so I'm sorry.
He's here.
Okay.
I'm just working my way down the funds. So beautification, about $10,000. We owe the school district some money who ultimately is reimbursing the service provider for Mary Waite Pool. This is per the interlocal agreement. And by the way, even when you factor in that $10K, we still, in terms of total operating cost, was under budget. And so it's just ideally the cost would have or the payment would happen last year. It's happening this year.
You'll remember we commit to $100,000 a year of operating subsidy and made available another 25 if they can demonstrate that they ended up in the red even at the 100, and they could request up to another 125 to balance the books.
Up to another 25.
Another 25, what did I say?
So this is tapping 10 of that 25.
So they're doing 10 of the 25.
Yep, thanks.
And this will probably get re-reported to on Thursday night with the school board.
Youth and Family Services, the donation bins did not get purchased for various reasons. They were busy last year. They want to get that done this year. 15.5 is what was budgeted.
I thought we didn't want to do those. Did we not? Didn't we have reservations about these bins?
There's lots of discussion.
I remember a conversation. I remember some reservation to express, and I remember an ultimate decision to approve it.
Yep. Some minor budgeted salary benefit corrections. And finally, as Dan mentioned, on $32,000 on the engineering study of slope movement behind maintenance center.
Do we need to pause for a minute here? You guys? Okay.
No,
All right.
So there's a request for $32,000 for an engineering study of slope movement behind the maintenance center. And I had asked Chip and Rich for some more information on that just a few minutes before the meeting, which they did not have a chance to put together for the meeting. So I'm not saying we pull this off, but it raises enough red flags when you talk about slope movement on Mercer Island as to what exactly that means and what we're concerned about. And Rich was pointing out that the city's main water line runs through, or one of the city's main water lines runs through that hillside, and there may be some issues as to whether the city of Seattle might have some
supply line.
Maybe the city of Seattle might have some obligations vis-a-vis that line. So what I would hope is that that you could talk to Glenn and maybe have Glenn provide a more detailed memo to the council.
Sure.
Or 5-minute briefing or something to give us some idea, or maybe let
I
Francie know.
recruited Francie here, the right side of my brain, to help provide some perspective, what's happened in the past, and responsibility.
Francie Lake, Deputy Finance Director. The hillside, or the water main that comes through that hillside is our main line from Seattle. We, together with Seattle, have been studying that hillside for quite a few years already, since a break happened about, I don't remember exactly, but I'm going to say about 6 years ago. It is, according to Seattle, our financial responsibility. They are actually the ones conducting the study, and we are paying for it.
Can we have, because Rich was thinking that there might be something in the 50-year supply agreement.
Yeah, our argument used to be that was Seattle's responsibility all the way up to the master meter, which is up on top of Gallagher Hill Road. But I think in the last supply agreement, and this is what we need to go back and research, because I just don't remember whether or not that changed, where we took responsibility from the East Channel Bridge all the way up. So, Katie, you look like you're about to...
I was going to say, I'll look at it.
Yeah, I think we need, that's the piece of information I think Dan wants to hear about is what changed, if anything, in Seattle's responsibility for the line.
I think we really need to know what we're potentially buying into here. So before anyone starts cutting a check for $32,000, and this is new information also, that the city of Seattle is actually doing the study and we're reimbursing them. And that obviously sets a precedent on what happens after this. So before we set that precedent, we really need to make sure our legal position is unambiguous here.
We'll check it out. And just so that nobody gets too concerned about us talking about land movement around our supply line, we actually have 2 supply lines. There's a bypass that has been installed since this supply line was installed many, many years ago. So even when we had the break on this line, it was not a really big deal to do some movements with valves and continue to have supply across the island. That line goes down East Mercer Way and then up to the reservoir further south. So this is important stuff, but it's not like life-threatening worry if somehow we had a landslide.
So when you say movement behind the maintenance center, how do you know what kind of movement are we talking about?
Well, when the maintenance shop was originally built, there was a slide during the construction. That is a wet hill.
And how many years was that?
Oh, about 30 years ago.
So hopefully we're not basing this need based on that 30 years ago.
No, because then there was a movement and a breakage of that line about 7, 8 years ago, and it was a mess. It was in the winter during temperatures below 32. So we don't want to have that happen again. And so both Seattle and Mercer Island, this one has been on our radar for quite a while. It's a big pipe under a lot of pressure.
As are we. Okay. So that's the background. So noted. And so we'll follow up on that regarding the 32K and the responsibility for that. Stormwater work, $55K to finish up the NPDES Phase 2 program work. Trying to get it done last year, didn't happen. It's supposed to get done this year. And then some minor salary benefit adjustment and computer equipment to fix an error there. That concludes the operating carryovers. Everything else on the next page, page 31 of Exhibit 1, are all CIP project-related carryovers. And I wasn't going to go through each one because there's so many of them. For the most part, just to briefly summarize, it's usually about finishing up work, kind of punch list items for the most part, and final payments that occur during the first few months of the year. And in other cases, it's about projects that didn't get done. I'll take an example, document management. And we didn't, for various reasons, didn't have a dedicated staff resource, and so we have a backup of stuff that needs to get done. And we've since hired someone and who's going to address that backup.
But it would be safe to say, I hope, that the dollars are moving, but the project overall isn't expanded as a result of this. It's simply that it crossed the boundary of one year
It's
to
for
the
the
next.
most part
and-
across the boundaries. There's an example where I am reprogramming some money. For example, I have some savings in the orthophotos, the aerial photography project. I needed a little bit more money for the emergency generator for the South End emergency shelter, okay? And the school district isn't able to pony up $35,000 as originally, I won't say promised, but that was the agreement. And so we've been looking at a different site. We've since purchased the mobile generator, and we didn't budget for the sales tax. I need another $4,000 and change. I'm taking that from another project. So it's taking savings from another project and reprogramming it for the emergency generator in this case. But for the most part, it's taking money that wasn't spent last year for a given project, carrying it over for that same project.
We set a goal for all our project managers to try and complete projects in the year of their funding. So when we get a long list of carryovers, it's kind of like, we needed 13 months to get the project done. Would have been nice to just do it in 12. So we send a message back to the staff. Next year, let's try and get it done in 12 or less.
Well, I can comment. I was up at a marina last weekend up at the north end of Lake Washington, and I looked over and I saw a familiar-looking boat, and it was the Marine Patrol boat with 3 great big 300-horsepower engines on the back. So it's done. That's fleet replacement.
Okay. Any questions on these various budget adjustments? If not, there's an item of business before the council to...
You ready for a motion?
That'd be great.
Okay. So back to page 1, folks, and if anybody, we've got 2 proposed motions there.
I move to suspend the City Council Rules of Procedure 5.2 requiring a second reading for an ordinance.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Okay.
I propose that we adopt ordinance number 13-04, amending the 2013-2014 budget.
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chip, thank you.
Thank you.
You're all set, right?
Well done.
Very good. Okay, we move to item 10, Agenda Bill 4821, City Manager Selection Process Information. Welcome, Chris Siegel.
Thank you, Chris Siegel, Distribution Resources Director. So as you know, Rick Conrad has announced his upcoming retirement by December 31st of this year. And council has directed staff to put together the options available to you in recruiting or filling that position. So I'm going to outline, or I've outlined in the agenda bill, 4 options, and I'll go through each one of those options that's in your agenda bill. I want to make the point that you can always custom tailor any of the options. They're not set in stone as they've been presented or laid out in the agenda bill. I just want to make that clear. So the first option is appointing an existing city employee. So in each of these options, I've given a timeline and an estimated cost, and the cost doesn't include things like staff time. It's just new dollars that we'd have to put towards whatever the processes we're using. So this is the quickest, usually less than a month. The cost is very minimal. This is an option when you generally have a viable candidate as a city employee already. You can use an interview process or not. Some appointments are made without an interview process. The interview process can include just an interview with the council. It can include a much more formal process that includes presentations, panel interviews, written exercises. It's really up to you how you want to put it together. And generally, though, with this option,
the process is scaled back because the thought is the candidate has, or the existing employee has already demonstrated their ability to meet what you would normally find out in an interview process with somebody that you don't know. This is the most common option where a provisional appointment is made. So an internal employee is appointed, and oftentimes that's on a provisional basis, sort of a test run period. That's not as common in the other elements I'm going to present, but it doesn't mean it can't happen. So the advantages that I listed for appointment is it's minimal cost, a short time frame, the candidate is a known quantity, the relationships both internally and externally are already established, so there's a short orientation period, minimal disruptions to the city operations, and a provisional appointment, if you choose to do that, allows for a evaluation period of the candidate's ability to perform the job. The disadvantages, it excludes potential interested and qualified candidates, especially externally, and some decision makers may be uncomfortable making an appointment without a formal process.
So I imagine that this indicates that there's no legal requirement to have an open process or to post this publicly, that there would be an opening or anything like that. It's completely to our discretion.
It is to your discretion. So we do have some positions that we have civil service rules that govern those positions. This is not in this case. Okay, so option 2.
And Chris, everybody's read this agenda bill, I assume? So I would suggest if you want to just highlight the key differences as you see them rather than running through the whole thing.
Got it. Okay. So internal employee recruitment, couple months, less than $1,000. There's a cost because there is a process in place. You have to develop a recruitment announcement. You have to put together a more formal interview process, usually if there's more than one candidate, so there's some costs associated with that. So the advantages, minimal cost, it's a relatively short time frame, candidates are known quantities. This is usually the process that takes place if you have more than one internal candidate. So you have at least 2 interested candidates internally that you think at least one of them is a good option. But like I said in the first option, you can certainly do an interview process. It's just normally, if you just have one interested candidate, you're not doing an open recruitment, gathering information. So, like
I say, you probably don't need to go bullet by bullet through that, since it's, I think, it reflects what's here.
So there are a couple of disadvantages, limited candidate pool, and if the process doesn't produce a finalist, what I mean by morale issues is maybe somebody who thought they might get the job doesn't, and they still have to work, and you might lose that employee. So that's what that means. Option 3 is an open recruitment managed internally. That's by our HR department. And 5 to 7 months, the cost is $5 to $10K. And the reason that this has, the costs go up quite a bit is your advertisement. The efforts of advertising at this level of a candidate, you're paying for at least some of their expenses to come and interview with you. And so that's what those 5 and 10 figures pertain to. So it's less expensive than using a professional recruitment firm, and it's a shorter time period, but also a more substantially more expensive than doing an internal process. If you were wanting to do an open recruitment for both internal and external candidates, of course, we can do it internally. The disadvantages are it's added to existing workloads, so we don't spend the time that a recruitment firm would spend. We don't have the network of candidates that recruitments, especially that specialize in executive local government recruitments have. And so you might not get the candidate pool that you would if you did hire an outside firm. which takes you to the final option, which is hiring a professional recruitment firm. This is the most common option that cities use, especially if they don't have a viable internal candidate. It's very costly. It's $30,000 to $40,000. About $20,000 of that is just consultant fees. The rest of it is consultants do a lot of vetting of the candidates, so they'll travel to the candidate before they give you a pool and do some sort of interview process, going to Colorado or Oregon, and so you're paying for the consultant's travel fees. You're paying for your candidates to come here. At this level, the candidates are expecting their expenses to, like I said before, to be paid for, at least, if not all, at least a fair portion. But like I said, with the disadvantages of the internally managed recruitment process, the advantage to this is you're going to most likely get a better candidate pool, and I think all of them that I at least know of will guarantee the success of a candidate for some period of time. And if the candidate's not successful and it's a year period, then they'll recruit for you again at no cost. So, and it's generally viewed as the most fair and objective process. Like I said, it's the most common, especially if there's not an internal candidate. It takes a long time, and a lot of that, 2 months of that, is just for a request for proposal process. So you have to go through, the council would have to go through an RFP process and select the recruitment firm. That takes a number of months, and then you get into the recruitment process itself, which would take anywhere from 5 to 7 months. So I think that's probably it, other than answering your questions.
Okay, thank you. Questions?
Just a point of clarification.
Yeah.
In the event that you decide to pursue some version or another of an external recruitment, I assume that, or what would we call it? We call it option 3, open recruitment process, and option 4, that would not preclude an internal candidate from applying.
Correct. Yeah, both would be external and internal would be invited to apply.
Okay, good.
Other questions? Okay.
What's the outcome we're looking for tonight? Just, this is point of information, or are we
Well,
one?
no, that's a good question. It's.
I think we, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I think Tom's question is a fair one. We have a deadline at the end of the year when, obviously, we want to have somebody sitting in city manager's chair. Short of that, we really haven't figured out yet what this year looks like. So, the intent of tonight was to understand what the range of options look like and then figure out how we're going to go about getting this done. Obviously, if we're going with, an option 1, less than a month, we could wait until November, and we could still have the whole thing done.
I'd suggest
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Don't know why I'm saying that.
Whereas if we're going with option 4, we better hop on it, because we're going to have a hole here if we don't. So the intent was really, let's just tee the whole conversation up and begin to figure out how we want to move. I'd say for right now, let's hear what people are thinking and see where we get to. I don't think we've got a preconceived idea of where we have to land tonight.
But it's interesting, because if looking at what Chris has laid out here, if we're going, as Bruce said, if we're going to go with option 3 or 4, it basically means we have to start now. If we're going to go with option 1 or 2, then we almost need to go now as well, because if 1 and 2 doesn't work out, then we have to switch to 3 or 4, and we're then out of time. So if we waited till October or November to do 1 or 2, and we're not happy with the internal candidate process for whatever reason, we can't reach agreement, whatever it may be, then we've sort of boxed ourselves into a corner. And
There's a way to get out of that corner, though. If you were to go with option 1 or 2 and you didn't come up with an internal candidate you were prepared to go forward with, you could still take the time, do it on the time frame you want, and it may mean slipping into 2014 with an appointed acting person for some period of time. Wouldn't be me, but it would be somebody else. But it's very common.
Is what's his name still up?
It's very common, and it could be internal. I mean, we could find somebody inside the city
that's going to be available.
You mean Manny? Manny was here, Linda Herzog did it. It's very common. There are people out there that would do the acting position for whatever time period you would need. So don't feel like this clock is ticking too toughly on you. I would pick the process that meets your needs first, and the timing can be worked out.
Mike Grady.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same thing. I think we ought to pursue option 3 because it gives us enough flexibility to look both internal and external, and it's not discounting any individual or individuals that currently work for the city, but I think to what extent we can have an open and transparent process would be to our advantage, and it's certainly less costly than bringing on a professional firm. So that's been my experience, and they typically work pretty well.
Okay, so I think we're moving beyond questions and into, let's just get thoughts out and figure out where we're going to try and land. Mike Cyril.
I would go for the more expensive option. I hate to say that, but option 4, I know. To Chris's point, I think you said it's the most accepted process at this level, and it widens the net of potential applicants, certainly internal and externally. So I'm for option 4 on this.
Okay. Dan.
I think it's one of these things we're going to pick all the options. I'd actually support option 2. I can think, just looking around at city staff, that we have 4 or 5 people who would be individuals that I would seriously consider for the position of city manager on our staff. That we're very fortunate in that regard to have so many really expert individuals. I remember, unfortunately, we've had too many instances in recent history where we've gone through an external recruiting process and it has not worked out the way we intended it to work out, and for whatever reason. And it just reinforces in my mind that on one hand you've got a few hours of interview time, on the other hand you've got working with a person for months or years, and all that you learn about that person through that. And what you never know, though, is how that person actually does when he or she is in the city manager position. I could see a very good result where if we went through an option 2 and selected one, and if there were multiple applicants, selected one of those people, and then put them on some sort of 1-year provisional contract so we could see how he or she actually performed in a city manager position. And if they worked out, then I think that's a huge plus for the city in terms of making sure we end up with someone who really works. So if it turns out that after 1 year or somewhere during that 1 year that he or she is not working out, then you go and recruit someone nationally or regionally or whatever you do. But we have some excellent potential candidates within the city, and I'd like to at least give one of them an opportunity, depending on how many apply, at least one of them an opportunity to show what they can do as city manager.
Jane.
Well, I agree completely with Dan on this one. I am in favor of option 2. This is our most important job. This city hasn't hired a city manager in 27 years.
17.
17. Okay, well, we hired you, but we haven't done a search. We haven't done a big external search in 27 years. Paul Lansbury was searched for, apparently, but that was a long time ago. we have, a wonderful history of people who love to work here and stay, and I think we probably have some excellent candidates within the city. I'm very much in favor of promotion within when you get the candidate you want, and I think we have a wonderful chance for that possibility. So I am in favor of option 2, and I agree with the city manager who said if we hire someone, they don't work out, we can use an interim. But I would say for any candidate, option 2 or option 3, I would like to see a 1-year probationary or provisional appointment.
Okay, Debbie or Tana, I'm going to give Debbie or Tana a shot because based on your recommendation here.
Tana's reaching for mine.
I have to say I'm a bit torn on this one. I think the city definitely has a history of extremely impressive quality hiring in all the staff that I've worked with. And I know that we do have some fabulous internal candidates. And I think that we're losing quite a bit of city history and knowledge with Rich's departure. And we have, speaking for myself, some new council members, and so we have a pretty fresh group up here, and it potentially could get fresher after November. And so, of course, or not, and so there's a concern there in terms of again being a completely fresh group and losing some of that history. On the other hand, Mercer Island is a important city in our region, and I think the community might look to us to have a wider reach of looking for a broad candidate pool. So that's just my perspective to say I'm torn on this one.
Okay, Debbie, do you want to have a shot?
Yeah, I'm torn as well. Again, I think similar to Dan, there's this list of candidates that I think from within the city would be absolutely outstanding potential city managers, obviously to be further explored. And then I also realize, I think as Tana said, that sometimes pushing your own boundaries a little bit is not necessarily a bad thing, and quite often you might realize all the more how impressive your current staff is. I think, if I am pressed to make a decision tonight, I think I'm going to say I think we should start absolutely with an internal process. And if for some reason that does not work out, then we ensure that we have sufficient time, hopefully, to move forward before City Manager Conrad's departure, because I still would rather see this wrapped up before he goes.
Okay. Speaking for myself, and I think, Debbie, you said it well, I favor an internal process to at least see where we stand internally, and with the idea that we can always initiate an external process if we don't feel happy about what we got internally, but I am comfortable that we ought to see where we stand internally first. So that's my sense. Mike, over to you.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I didn't make, or I should say more thoughts came to me after listening to everyone. So I appreciate having a second bite at this. So I think what we as council need to do, certainly not lecturing anybody, but what we need to do is we kind of need to look at our organization and recognize that we do have a very strong staff. Our directors are very strong. And with that strength, that should be an assurance for us to maybe accept some risk in going outside our comfort zone. Now, we have an organization at the director level that are somewhat inbred to either Mercer Island or the Seattle area, certainly the region. And there are pros and cons to that. What I'll suggest to the council is looking at the advantage of pulling somebody way from the outside, of where our staff is from. And the advantage that you get from that is new ideas, fresh ideas, which is good for an organization. It's good for an organization to have a strong core at all levels that know the organization inside and out. They've lived and breathed the organization for many years. That's good. But if you have that from top to bottom, I don't think that's necessarily good. What is, I think, the ideal situation is when you have a good mix, and I'm not saying it's a 50-50 mix or a 25-75 mix, but I would suggest that at our director level, we've got a very, very strong understanding of our organization, an understanding that has been developed from being in the organization for many years, in which case it would benefit the city, the organization, that pull fresh eyes from the outside to complement the many strengths that we have. And that's why I'm suggesting that we go for the fourth option.
Okay. Debbie?
Yeah, Mike brings up some interesting points. I think the concept of bringing new ideas, new perspective in is always healthy to any organization. And I think by virtue of the fact that we would be looking first at internal candidates, that would happen because somebody would vacate a space and an important director level position would be open. I would hope if there were more than one candidate that the candidates that were not appointed would not also subsequently leave. But there was one comment you made that left me somewhat uncomfortable, and I'm going to hope that maybe you can clarify and settle my concerns. You referred to the director level as somewhat inbred. And maybe I misheard that, misinterpreted it, but it has left me feeling uneasy. If you could clarify.
I hate it, Councilmember Berlin, when I make you uneasy. It seems to happen more often to me than anybody else, so I really apologize for that. I guess you are. I guess you are. What would be a better way to say it? We have directors, and it's a positive. There are positive and negatives. We have directors who have come up through the ranks, if you will. Maybe that would be a more articulate way of putting it.
Okay, I think I've heard 4 votes in favor of trying 2. Is that going to cause hissy fits if we move that way, or are we, Mike, go ahead.
Well, I guess I would challenge that because, one, in the agenda bill, it doesn't say that we're making a decision. So I have to say that the presentation was a bit lacking in that department. And, it's no fault of yours, Chris, but it would have been nice to know that we were going to take a vote and move toward a certain direction. So having said that, I have a hard time understanding if you move forward with 2 and it doesn't work out, that somehow then you can default to 3 and 4. When we've just heard that 3 and 4 are going to take us, a number of months to proceed. So I guess I would challenge the council before you do the thumbs up, thumbs down, to think long and hard about why you would think that that would be a process that would breed success. Because in my mind, the more open the process, the better candidates we get, and that's not discounting anyone that works for the city. Matter of fact, it's just the opposite. I got to believe that a number of candidates that I can name off the top of the head that aren't very far from me right now would be very qualified candidates, and as I would compare them to other candidates across the country, they would score very highly. So to me, I think it's like building a good sports team. You try to bring in the best athletes, you try to bring in the best professors at a university, and you do that with an open process, and you look for the best and the brightest. And nothing about choosing 3 and 4 speaks at all against anyone that currently works for the city. But what it does say is we're going to be deliberate in our process. We're going to look for as many candidates as we can. And we're going to give as many people the opportunity to apply for this very important job that are highly qualified. So I guess, I would ask those that think that 2 is the best option to think long and hard. If 2 doesn't work out, you may not have time to do 3 and 4. So.
And I didn't phrase it very well, Mike, but my initial comment there was, are we ready to take a vote on this? Because it does say briefing only, no action necessary. So the question, and Tana raised it at the beginning here, is are we going to try and vote on this tonight? What I was trying to do is say, okay, I hear a consensus formed tonight, and so if not taking a decision tonight on this, what's Plan B? Do we push? Do we say, okay, we've heard the presentation, but we didn't specifically say we're going to vote on it tonight, and therefore we're going to, at our next meeting, take the vote so that there's more time for cogitation on it and a vote then? I'm not trying to decide this. I'm trying to figure out where everybody wants to land and do it fairly. So help me out here. Dan, if you want to take a shot, please do.
No, I think that we're not going to know anything more 2 weeks from now than we know tonight on the subject as to what we're going to do here. I think that it is important that we leave an opportunity for an external search if the internal process doesn't work. What I would encourage the council to consider doing is authorizing Chris to initiate an option 2 process sometime, and actually initiate it within the next couple of months, to first determine how many internal candidates we have. Because if it turns out that, contrary to the fact that we have many qualified people, only one person ends up applying, that's something the council needs to know about, and then decide whether just having one person apply for it is enough to go forward with that person. So I think there's nothing wrong. In my mind, there would be nothing wrong with making this decision in June, July, or August as in terms of actually selecting the person. If we end up with a good internal candidate and the council ends up willing to support him or her, and we can reach an agreement with them, then the fact that they're going to be the heir apparent and have to wait 6 months, but that provides for a nice long transition. If we then need to be starting the process of filling that person's position, we're able to do that, so they're able to hit the ground running with a full staff. I mean, there's a lot of advantages to getting this thing going quickly and ending the uncertainty here. So I would encourage the council to give Chris the authority to right away start moving the process forward with option 2, come back to the council in a couple of weeks with a timeline of how she would do that, and see where we end up, and hopefully we'll know by June or so who the internal candidate or candidates are, and where we proceed at that point.
Anyone else?
Well, I would just agree again with Dan. I heard Mike use one phrase, we should get as many candidates as we can, which I think if you've ever done any hiring, that's a real mistake to just, you don't want quantity here, you want the right person. And so I think we should.
I've done a lot of hiring with them.
Yeah, I know, well, I'm sure, but.
And I try to get as many people to apply as possible.
Yes, but in the end, you hire one person. So I would suggest that we, as Dan suggested, authorize Chris to see what's out there within the city staff now and report back to us, but I favor option 2.
Hi, Miss Torn. You want to bring any more insight to this whole discussion?
As listen to folks, I think I'll continue in my torn way, but maybe as I say it out loud, it will become more clear. If we, with what Dan said, we open it up to internal candidates and we see what we end up with, and we get down to one and we don't like that one, then we want to throw it open. Obviously, we kind of have already said we don't like that one person, so I think we just have to be careful on that front. On the other hand, if we open it up to a broad national search, we may very well not get our internal candidates to apply in that situation because they feel that we have passed them up, or that we are de facto saying that we don't think that they're qualified, even if we haven't first opened it up. So I think on both of those sides we need to be really careful on what our decision, the unintended consequence of our decision being, again, that if we just go with internal and we don't like anyone, then obviously we've said, we don't like them. And if we throw it open larger, those people might not even apply.
Yeah, I'm kind of the bad guy on this, although Councilmember Gray is a little bit of a bad guy also, suggesting option 3, and you're a little bit of a bad gal, being not completely on one or two.
He's at least a frugal bad guy.
That's right, he's a frugal bad guy. She's almost a bad gal, so.
I was going to ask what you meant by
I did not mean to offend anybody at all. I'm sorry.
It's getting late.
I don't mean to, for the staff who's here, I think it reinforces if an internal candidate is put up against the external candidates and wins. I think that's a feather. I think that works to the internal candidate's advantage, and me suggest or pointing out the advantages of an external candidate, me pointing out those advantages should not be implied that I'm discounting internal candidates or at all.
You spend $40,000.
What's that?
You spend $40,000 finding out.
Nobody knows that more than I do. I appreciate that. But if that's your issue, then you'd be on option 3. So yeah, that's what I want to say is that reinforces the internal candidate selected. Having gone against the external candidate reinforces the internal candidate's confidence, I think, going into the position.
I'll just make one comment to throw in the mix. Yesterday I called a good friend of mine who is retired now but was a headhunter, executive search guy, searched for CEOs and CFOs for big companies all over the country. And I kind of just gave the scenario and said, well, what do you think? And he said, well, if there are some internal candidates, it's easy. Why waste a big executive search if you've got some good candidates, narrow it down to one, offer them the job with a 1-year probation, and if at the end, if that works out, great. If it doesn't, start over. But he saw it as a very simple decision. If you got a few good candidates, go with it.
Okay, here's where I'm landing on this, and Dan's going off on me. We tentatively have 4 saying option 2. We have Mike saying option 3. We have Mike saying option 4. We have Tana saying I don't know. We had this is our first time addressing this issue. This is a major issue for us. I'm going to pull my support for option 2 right now so that it doesn't get to 4 votes tonight, with the intent of moving this to our next meeting, and with the hope that you will kibitz amongst yourselves, think about where you want to be, and that we will have a vote at that meeting, which we will all be comfortable standing by the results of. I think this is just too important for us to push and have feelings like you got, to some extent, blindsided by it. I don't want that. But at the end of the day, it sounds like we may not all end up on the same page, but I hope that we will all end up respecting wherever it is that we land on this. So put it on our next calendar.
Can I just say
throw
one thing?
option 1 out the door because no one was on option 1. Options 2, 3, and 4 are in, and if you want to change all that.
Well, no, I just need to say that I'm going to be in Washington, D.C. at your next meeting, so I won't be here. So we'll have to.
That's okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
I think that's okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you for teeing up the options, but
And
I
while
think
you're there,
we're-
could you get us a FHWA decision?
Yeah.
Set up a meeting with
Okay, so with that, we're going to set this one aside. You know what you need in terms of putting it together for our next meeting. If you have questions more about any of these, feel free to talk to Chris. And now we move to other business. Council member absences. None tonight, so no need to excuse anybody. And anyone have a new one upcoming that we should be aware of?
I will not be at the joint meeting with the school board, sadly.
Okay.
And neither will I, sadly.
Oh, is that right?
Okay.
Ally and I have talked Friday, and we decided the best way
to have the meeting for all of you is up here, so you're all mic'd up, because we're going to broadcast it, but with 2 of you gone, this should be actually pretty easy. I was worried it was going to be...
Crowded.
So thank you for being gone.
So, yeah, this is going to work great.
All right. Any other absences upcoming we should be aware of? I think I told you I'll be gone the July, or the beginning of August meeting, so I didn't see that on
August
here.
5th?
Yeah.
I am probably gone July 20th.
There's no meeting. It's okay.
Knock yourself out there.
July 15th. July 15th.
All right. Anyone else? All right. Thank you for that. Planning schedule. We know.
Well, it's busy. It's gotten a little easier to manage. I spent some time with the mayor before he went off on his trip, and we made a planning schedule management call. I'm going to ask Karen Reed to provide me with a different kind of proposal on the strategic planning work that we had said. We left the planning session and said we would do a quarterly meeting and a study session with you, like about every 3 months for the rest of the year. And in thinking about it, it's probably unrealistic that in 1 hour you can catch up, do something substantive, and make progress. So I'm going to get a different kind of proposal where we do something this year that is maybe a little more intense and delivers. So that gave me some room in the planning schedule. There's still some pretty busy meetings, but there are some that aren't so busy, so what you see is working.
Other comments on the planning schedule? Jane, then Mike, and then Debbie.
Just wanted a reminder that we need to schedule Citizen of the Year award.
Yes, we do.
Before we forget who we appoint.
Yes, and I also need to schedule, I think we'll have to do this in a 2-step process, the proposal to rename the Lid Park. We wanted to get it in front of you, allow some public comment, and then if it's got legs, then you decide. So I need to get both of those on there right away.
Mike?
Rich, I know we got the shoreline master plan on May 20th. Do we have comments back from Ecology yet?
Not yet.
When do you anticipate getting those?
I don't know. I'd have to check with Scott and George. You've done the meeting where you had the public comments, and now we've just got to hear back from them. And
I think we were hoping within a month or so. I'm guessing.
Okay. Can we get a copy of those as soon as you get them?
You bet.
Okay, thank you. Now, I note on the 3rd of June, there's a bike auto discussion that What is that about?
That's, as you'll recall from your planning session, you had a conversation and a kind of a charter or scoping of a community discussion about the Mercer Ways.
Is that the refinement of that piece?
That will be the report back after the outreach group has had its say, so it'll be a report back from staff to the council. So we're going to try and get all that done by then, so that anything, if we need to, we can fold it into the TIP in May, June.
Okay. The other, just a couple. Do we have any further clarification on the LID grant and the ability to use or not use that funding?
I'll have to double check and get back to you. I believe I remember hearing even last week that we asked for flexibility from ecology and we did not get it.
Okay.
So I think our funding is gone.
Would you let me know
Yeah.
for sure either way, so I can run that up the food chain? And then two other things. I note we have a plastic bag ordinance teed up in November. Is there any chance we can do that before November?
That is up to the council.
Okay. Well, I think to what extent we can get that done earlier would be good.
It's at the second half of the year at a number of council members' requests.
I mean, code. I thought that was out of the planning session itself, that we pushed it to there. So I don't think there's anything nefarious in that, Mike. It was...
No. I just, I'm eager to get this kind of stuff done. The last thing is, Clark, I noticed the property deal with Clark Beach. What is that about in November?
Property surplus.
Oh, is that the Parks and Rec issue?
I'm not sure it's the same thing. I've got to go back here.
So the one we're cleaning up that one concern.
Well, that would be something that we were doing in June.
Okay.
It looked like a property...
that's what the one that it is. There's, we have an encroachment issue that we're trying to resolve, and trading some Clark Beach, small piece of Clark Beach property that's encroached upon with another, and add some property elsewhere in open space on the island and try
to build Youth Theater Northwest?
And peace in the Middle East. The Parks and Rec Committee has seen this and given us so far a thumbs up. Keep going.
Okay.
You want to add a fourth
And better yet, by putting it down at Clark Beach, we'll get everybody a lot of exercise. I know.
And then we'll run the...
Bicycles only.
Run the don't get me started. We'll have light rail go down there, too.
Okay. I think it was to Debbie, is that right?
Apologies if it's here and I'm not seeing it. I think we're due to have another visit from our friends at Sound Transit.
You haven't seen it yet. I sent an email to Ron Lewis last week and asked that we get that scheduled by your June planning session. So.
Okay. I've got one, and forgive me, this is, if somebody read it more closely than I did, please speak up. But there was a piece in the paper today suggesting that cities ought to think about their Comcast franchise agreements and ask for something different than standard. I don't know, Katie, if you saw that. It was the top of local section, I think, might have been Danny.
Go look it up.
Yeah, please do. I see that we've got Comcast franchise agreement coming up in August. And so to the extent that there's something there that's going to have some traction in the region around modifications of those contracts, it would be worth us being aware of and potentially participating in that.
Bruce, there was a citizen, if you recall, a long time ago, 6 months ago, who was kind of pushing us on some sort of high-speed internet, and other communities were doing this or that. I'll try to dig up his email and kind of piggyback on what you're suggesting.
Okay.
Another thing I don't, sorry.
Well, I've got one more on that. I guess it's essentially sort of a build-off of the June 3 item that Mike brought up, the bike auto discussion. So if you recall, this goes back to our parking on the Mercer's thing, and what we said is let's have a citizen committee at least look at potential changes. There was some push amongst the citizenry about this. What we agreed was that staff was going to pull together citizenry for like a Saturday morning discussion, and we were going to get some particularly engaged folks, some of the people who had shown particular thoughtfulness and engagement on the issue to be involved in that. We need now to pull those folks together, and I would appreciate it if you would give me names of people you think ought to be serving on that, and then I will try and put together a list to bring back to council of the folks to do that. So send me the names of people you think ought to do that, and that'll lead into that staff-directed session, which will in turn lead into the June 3 feedback to the council. Tana? Never mind? Okay. Anything else?
I saw it on the AP's legal bill. Have we done this year an executive session where you kind of summarize all our legal things? I know we were thinking about doing that.
I think it's always a great idea to do a periodic litigation update, just sort of what claims are out there or what's been closed out in the last 6 months. So be happy to get that scheduled. We'll have to pick a meeting where you don't already have 5 regular business items.
Well, that was the executive session, wasn't it?
Yeah, but it just gets so late.
Next meeting, light.
Yeah, it's doable.
But I was thinking a 6 o'clock type executive session.
We can do that.
One other thing, weren't we talking at some point, at least some of us were talking at some point about this resolution that's going around among mayors with respect to guns?
Yeah, so thank you for bringing that up. So Tana had been nudging me on this one. So there were citizens who were engaging on this one. We had a meeting with staff. We agreed to put it on our joint agenda. So it's here as briefing on school safety and partnership. And the thought was that that would be a time to talk about whether there's support for signing onto this mayor's agreement.
But that would, I mean, presumably, if we're going to do that, we'd want to do it in a regular council meeting so public could weigh in on that. Because the public would not pick up this agenda item at a joint committee meeting.
Yeah, if I'm showing up to this joint meeting, we're going to talk about that. I'm getting blindsided.
Yeah. Okay. So I think if we're going to talk about it as a council, then it should be scheduled as a separate agenda item. I mean, we can talk about whether the school board's interested in doing it as well, but I agree that you can't authorize that in the joint meeting with the school board, I don't think.
So is the council interested in making it an agenda item then? Is that where you were going, or were you going to?
No, I was going a very different direction. Not about that issue, just simply, I'll be the cold water here, but you guys don't need to be adding work. If anything, I'm looking to find ways to trim work items because I don't think we can get everything done now that I-90 has consumed so much of our time. So we could do this, Dan. I mean, it wouldn't take very long to have, well, I'd say it wouldn't take very long. It usually does. But all I'm just saying is be cautious in adding more work because you added to your already pretty hefty work plan, you added 25% more council work.
Yeah, and the thought in putting it here was that gun safety clearly ties together. It's clearly a issue that links school district and city in a way that many issues don't. And so the thought was this is probably the appropriate place to make that part of the conversation rather than just within the council. So
I'd see it as not an either or, but an either and, or a yes and, not a yes but. So with the schools and with the city.
I think that's the right answer. I mean, I think we can, but I do think we can't we owe the public the chance to weigh in on it, and this is not the meeting we asked. There's no appearances at this meeting. There's no opportunity for the public to engage.
So how about we do this? You have your joint meeting later this week. At your June mini planning session, we bring out the planning schedule again, and we have a conversation about if you want to add what's going to be subtracted. We need to do a little bit of work plan management, and I think there are a couple things that you could probably put off to 2014 without losing a whole lot of momentum. But maybe do a bigger picture look at your schedule in early June.
Is okay with that?
So it's trying to make room for that, Dan, but...
No, that's fine. I know several of us have talked about it, and I didn't want to...
Tom, are you okay with that? I mean, I know that from the standpoint of some citizens, there's a real interest in moving faster than that, but, okay. All right.
Did we give the city manager guidance on the legal brief? Did we give him guidance on that?
Oh, executive session on a litigation update?
I don't think there was any objection to the idea.
Yeah, I think it's one I should be putting on there anyway, Mike, so.
Okay. Anything else planning schedule-wise? Board appointments, we've got lots of openings now. Ally's advertising them like mad. Give me a rough idea when we have a close on those, and would you anticipate them coming back?
May 1st is the deadline for applications, and then we will get them out to staff to review, and then we will turn them back over to the council with staff recommendations, and then the mayor makes the appointments with the ratification of the council. So we still need lots of applicants.
Great.
So.
Okay, thank you very much. Council member reports. Mr. Grady? No? Debbie? No? Jane?
Yeah, the Arts Council has been involved now with, they're getting involved with Sound Transit, with talking about art that might go eventually on the rail station on Mercer Island. Also, at the March 13th Open Space Conservancy Trust Board meeting, they finalized their work plan and for 2013, which they'll be bringing to us soon, but had an interesting discussion about the policy for special events held at Pioneer Park, which is kind of interesting. Apparently, in the last few years, there's been a trend toward more group activities like 5K runs, Volks marches, geocaching, orienteering, and groups are wanting to get a permit to have their event at Pioneer Park. And so there's the push-pull between, yes, wanting to have the park be used by the public, but the problems that can happen when delicate areas are tramped upon, too many people, that sort of thing. And the mission, of course, of the Conservancy Trust is to protect and maintain and preserve the park. So that turned out to be a much more complicated issue than we had originally planned. So we'll be working on that for a little bit, I'm sure, and it'll probably come to the council at some point. So.
Okay. Ken?
Just to make sure everyone else in the council knows, the Parks and Rec Committee was briefed by staff its last meeting on the Luther Burbank Playground. That's a reality. It's going to be built over the next couple of months and should be open to the public in July. And it looks like a fantastic facility. Great support from the Mercer Island Preschool Association, support from the Friends of Luther Burbank. This is going to be a real improvement for our kids.
You want to plug the auction?
Excellent, yeah.
Plug the MIP auction.
All right, I'm plugging the MIP auction. The Preschool Association is holding an auction, I believe, I want to say May 4th. I could have that date a little bit off, where all proceeds will be going to the Luther Burbank Playground. So please do either make a donation to the playground, buy a brick, or go to the auction. It's a very fun group of people. You don't have to be a member to show up, and no, you're not bringing your kids either, generally speaking. So come to the auction.
Very good. Donna?
I just wanted to mention that the Sustainability and Communications Manager is on board, and so that is very exciting on both of those levels, and has about 5 FTE list of work to do, so that is also exciting for him, I'm sure.
He'll be here at your next meeting, so we can more formally introduce him.
Great, so that's exciting. And then I just want to encourage people to, in the community, to weigh in on the Transportation Improvement Program that is open right now for public comments. I know that's one of the things I've heard from people in the community the most about, wanting a speed bump or a new sidewalk or this or that, and now's the time to put in comments, so I want to encourage that.
Thank you. Mike?
Craig Stone's going to be briefing the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce tomorrow at 7:30, if anybody's interested in that. And the comp plan, the updates to the comp plan, I saw an article or a notice in the paper. Can you briefly summarize what that means?
Well, every year, we always offer up an opportunity for anybody that wants to have us consider a comp plan change. It's a normal annual process we go through. Usually, we don't get anything. We will do a complete comprehensive plan update as required by state law in 2014. That'll be next year. And so that's a big deal. It's not a real tiny
When's
deal.
the suspense to have, this year's suspense to have suggested changes to the comp plan? And do you remember?
Have we had any responses?
You have not, evidently you have not, but...
Not that I know of.
When's the suspense to have it into you?
Oh, you mean the deadline? I don't know. We'll find out from George.
Okay, and wrapping up for myself, reminder, we started with Leap for Green upcoming April 20, so I'll just wrap up with that, Earth Day, and great thing to go to. It's also, I think, marks the end of accepting donations for the solar panel installation at the community center, so if you...
13th or the 20th?
13th.
Oh, 13th.
13th.
Leap for Green's on the 13th.
Ah, sorry.
As is the recycle event.
Next Saturday.
Yeah. April 20th is the event involving...
that's... Yeah, no wonder I'm thrown off here. So, good. I'll put out all sorts of misinformation for the people. 13th, Leap for Green. And
That's
20th
the
is
other one from the sister of...
the scholarship. Yeah.
Okay. Scholarship.
Should have tied those two together and done them at the same time. Solar panel donations, though, are still being accepted, and the wrap-up on that is this month. So, I know staff's already trying to figure out how to put that whole project together and make it happen by June, when the deadline occurs for beating sales tax on it. So, with that, I am done, and if there's nothing else, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Great. You know, that frog, I took my granddaughter for the last few years to Leap for Green. Totally
How'd it go, Mike?
freaked her out.